Hello and welcome. We have such a well-behaved audience. Everyone just automatically gets quiet, so that augurs very well for how today's program is going to go. My name is Jonathan Corrado. I'm the Director of Policy here at the Korea Society. We're normally headquartered in New York, but we thought we'd make an excursion down to D.C. for our very first inaugural Van Fleet conference, and we are honored and delighted to be surrounded by friends and supporters of our organization and who are like-minded to what we believe in. So it's my honor to introduce our very first speaker for today, who is our president and CEO, Mr. Tom Byrne, who comes from us from Moody's Sovereign Risk, and who first got his beak wet in the world of Korea as a Peace Corps volunteer all those years ago. So please help me to welcome our president, Mr. Tom Byrne.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Jonathan. I think that photo is from when I was a Peace Corps volunteer, even though I didn't have a suit back then. So hello and welcome to the inaugural Van Fleet Signature Policy Conference. We are delighted that you are all here with us at the Mayflower Hotel in Washington, D.C. I'd like to speak just for a moment about the namesake of this conference. General James A. Van Fleet founded the Korea Society after leading the U.S., UN, and South Korean fighting forces as a commander of the U.S. 8th Army in the Korean War. When he departed Korea in January 1953, he said, "I shall come back. You have made me a part of you. I know you are a part of me. I shall not ask you to give me back my heart. I leave it with you." Van Fleet promised to be a champion of the Korean people, saying that the historical significance of Korea deserves perpetuation. He made good on that promise, first by raising funds to support aid and reconstructive efforts, and later by strengthening the people-to-people ties through the establishment of the Korea Society. Today, the Korea Society strives to live up to Van Fleet's legacy by pursuing the same mission he set forth over 6 decades ago. If Van Fleet could see the state of the alliance today, I think that he would be pleased, but I doubt he would rest on his laurels. The alliance, there's always work to be done to strengthen the alliance, to overcome challenges. When South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol called U.S. President-elect Donald Trump right after the election to congratulate him, I think it's very encouraging that Trump led off the conversation by mentioning not the SMA, but the MRO, a new acronym perhaps in your lexicon. This refers to the maintenance, repair, and overhaul of naval vessels. The case in point is HD Hyundai Heavy Industries. It's the first Korean shipyard to sign a master ship repair agreement with the U.S. Navy. That was done this year. Relatedly, Hanwha Systems and Hanwha Ocean acquired Philly Shipyard. Philly Shipyard is one of the largest commercial shipbuilders in the U.S. Since 2000, it has built half of the Jones Act compliant vessels. Today I would like to announce that we are fortunate to be joined by a lineup of speakers who share Van Fleet's same commitment to the alliance and demonstrate his will to win. We are honored to welcome Ambassador Cho Hyundong for congratulatory remarks. Thank you for joining us, Ambassador Cho. Our first panel focuses on security. It is moderated by our board director, General Walter Sharp, actually, who's now our vice chair of the board, and features former ROK Minister of National Defense, Lee Jong-sup, another Korea Society board director, Admiral Harry Harris, and Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Affairs, Alexandra Bell. Thank you all for joining us. The diplomacy panel is moderated by our board chair, Ambassador Kathleen Stevens, and features former ROK Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se, and board director Dr. Victor Cha and Dr. Katrin Katz. We appreciate that you've all joined us for today's conference. The keynote address is provided by Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, Jedediah P. Royal. We are delighted to have him. Now it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ambassador Cho Hyundong, is the 28th ambassador of the Republic of Korea to the United States. He formerly served as first vice minister of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and he has served multiple assignments in the U.S., including as first secretary in 2000, deputy chief of mission in 2013, and now as ambassador. Ambassador Cho, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, President Byrne, for a kind introduction. Foreign Minister Yoon and Defense Minister Lee, Ambassador Stevens, Ambassador Harris, General Sharp, and distinguished guests. I'm so delighted to be here for today's forum, along with so many friends and familiar faces. Thank you to Korea Society for arranging today's event and inviting me to speak. Like I'm sure many of you have probably do, I feel like I have lived a few lifetimes recently. First, we had a barrage of pre-election coverage and poll watching in anticipation of election. And now for the past 2 weeks, the constant has shifted to predicting the changes that new administration will bring to D.C., the country, and the world. So today's topic, the indispensable partnership amid the increasing geopolitical competition, comes at an opportune time. Now that the election is over, our responsibility is to prepare ourselves for the upcoming Trump presidency. It is clear that even with the expected changes, our alliance will remain strong and continue to thrive. President Yoon spoke on the phone with President-elect Trump the day after the election. It was one of the first phone calls the President-elect received after his victory. And the speed and the cordiality of that call underscored the priority that both of our countries place on the alliance and our relationship. Regular communications between our leaders is a critical first step in maintaining and strengthening ties. And it's clear from their first conversation that we can expect frequent exchanges between the two leaders to continue. In addition, earlier this week, a bipartisan delegation from the Korean National Assembly came to Washington, D.C. The purpose of the visit was to show that the commitment Korea attaches to the continued success of the alliance encompasses all of our political parties. And if I may be blunt, right now, the alliance is more necessary than ever. The world is facing turmoil in many regions. The war in Ukraine, which began with Russia's unprovoked invasion in 2022, has now evolved into a prolonged stalemate with no clear solution in sight. Meanwhile, the conflict in the Middle East, triggered by Hamas' attack on Israel, is deteriorating on a daily basis as instability spread to both neighboring countries and those farther afield. The situation in East Asia, while less inflamed, remains a tinderbox, as North Korea's untethered aggressiveness has the potential for incitement at any time. There are no easy solutions to any of these problems, and we must prepare ourselves for the reality that they may get worse before they get better. In the case of North Korea, their antagonistic stance shows no sign of abating. Beyond their traditional provocation and the recent release of multiple trash-filled balloons across the DMZ, they launched ICBM mere days before the U.S. election. A strategic provocation that, though not unexpected, signals that likelihood that they are ready to conduct another nuclear test anytime. Perhaps even more worrying is the acceleration of military cooperation between Pyongyang and Moscow has caused North Korea's threat to expand globally. North Korea renewed and upgraded their defense treaty with Russia in June, and recently supplied Russians with over 13,000 containers filled with ammunition, missiles, and anti-tank rocket. Last month, North Korea reportedly sent military engineers to support Russian launches of KN-23 missiles. Most striking, of course, more than 10,000 North Korean soldiers have been sent to Russia and have begun to engage in combat operation alongside Russian forces in western Kursk Oblast. By contrast, the ROK has always used peace through strength as the essence of our defense. That is why our defense spending remains robust, 2.8% of our GDP. Only 3 U.S. allies, Israel, Greece, and Poland, spend more on defense as a percentage of GDP than Korea does. But we are doing what we must to enhance our relationship. In recent years, our ROK-US alliance has transformed into a nuclear-based partnership, epitomized by the creation of Nuclear Consultative Group and adoption of the guidelines for nuclear deterrence and nuclear operations. And this robust foundation has been strengthened by our newly invigorated trilateral cooperation incorporating Japan, the result of concerted effort from all 3 countries, including the courageous leadership of President Yoon Suk-yeol. I expect to see more trilateral cooperation in the years to come, including the launch of Trilateral Secretariat, which was announced at our last Trilateral Summit meeting held on the sidelines of APEC Summit in Peru last week. In addition, Korea and US signed a new 5-year special measures agreement before the election, which establishes the conditions to maintain US forces stationed in Korea and strengthen our combined defense posture. Building on this, I can say with confidence that our relationship will continue to move forward even with a new US administration. At the same time, our bilateral economic cooperation is stronger than ever. Last year, Korean companies invested over $21 billion in the US, more than any other foreign country. This led to over 20,000 new American jobs, the most jobs created by any foreign investor. That investment shows a commitment to the partnership unrelated to government. It shows that Korean business believe in the US and are willing to place a long-term stake on our continued cooperation. And given the importance of economic security today, that cooperation is vital to overcome the challenges we face together. 2 years ago, when the Inflation Reduction Act passed the Congress, it sent shock waves through the business community. Many of us wondered whether it was a death knell for foreign investment. Now, with the benefit of hindsight, we know that it wasn't the case at all. And Korean business turned out to be one of the real winners of that legislation. I'm not naive, but hopefully that occasion taught us all that first impression of a policy don't always last. It's up to us to adapt the situation where we find ourselves and uncover a way to succeed, regardless of what our earliest impression tell us. One industry clearly offers both commercial benefit and strategic significance is the shipbuilding, as President Tom Byrne mentioned already. China produces the majority of world ships with shipbuilding capacity more than 200 times that of the United States. But Korea is a close second. We produce about a quarter of global deliveries and are known for making ships quickly using state-of-art techniques at a relatively low cost. So we call it on time, on budget. Shipbuilding cooperation was one of the subjects that President-elect Trump mentioned during his phone call with President Yoon. So I'm confident that we'll see progress there in the near future. But shipbuilding is just one of the many areas where Korea-US cooperation can be expanded and improved. We should take our existing cooperation in areas such as semiconductors, batteries, and automobiles, and expand that to include the 2 new collaboration in strategic areas like AI, quantum, defense, and civil nuclear power. Today's discussion, I'm sure, will focus on topics related to diplomacy, security, and strategy. However, I hope that we also take some time to mention that I believe the true foundation of our alliance, the relation between Korea and American people, after all, and it is those relationships that have sustained us for over 70 years and will continue to sustain us in the future. Right now, about 2.6 million overseas Koreans live in the U.S., including both Korean nationals and Korean Americans. It is the largest Korean community outside of Korea. They play a vital role in building and strengthening our ties. This election day, the community saw impressive progress. Andy Kim became the first Korean American elected to the U.S. Senate. And actually, at the same time, he was the first Asian American senator from the East Coast of the United States. And 3 Korean American also elected or re-elected to the House of Representatives. So these results show positive and encouraging progress and solidify the grassroots power of the alliance. The strength and unity of Korean American community bolster the bond between our two nations on a deeper and more personal level. In closing, you distinguished guests here today are all veterans of key foreign policy and security positions in both United States and Korea. You know the importance of the alliance and have significant experience making crucial policy decisions that affect that relationship. I look forward to hearing your perspectives on today's topic, which I hope will provide us with some guidance as we work to shape the future direction of the alliance. That being said, I wanted to reiterate the clearest and the most important fact is that our alliance will remain strong, and I have every faith that it will continue to thrive. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Ambassador Cho. I'm now going to welcome our security panel to come on up and join the stage. And as they do so, it's a great pleasure to introduce our moderator for the panel. Come on up, don't be shy. Our moderator, his connection to Korea started from his very birth. You see, when General Walter Skip Sharp, this gentleman right here, was born in Morgantown, West Virginia. His father was on the other side of the world fighting in the Korean War. General Sharp graduated from West Point in 1974 and was commissioned as an armor officer. He commanded UNC, USFK, and UNC forces from 2008 to 2011. He also commanded troops in Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm. We're very fortunate that he is a director on the Korea Society Board. Please join me in welcoming General Sharp and our other panelists on the security panel. General Sharp, over to you.
Well, good morning. Thank you, Jonathan. And thanks for everybody coming. I'm very excited about this conference, this meeting, to be able to discuss some of the really key issues and enhancements to this very strong, which I believe is the strongest alliance in the world, the Republic of Korea U.S. alliance. You know, this panel is about how the Korea-U.S. alliance is evolving to meet future security challenges. And the recent 56th Security Consultative meeting highlighted a lot of the commitments and a lot of the things that we are doing to strengthen the security alliance. Let me just highlight a couple of the things that came out at that conference, came out at that meeting. First, it really was a reaffirmation that the ROK U.S. Security Alliance is the cornerstone of peace and stability, not only on the peninsula, and we'll talk about this later, but throughout the entire Indo-Pacific region. It highlighted the importance of denuclearization on the Korean peninsula and how we are going to enhance our ability to be able to deter and be prepared to respond to any sort of nuclear threat, and specifically a lot about the Nuclear Consultative Group, which also we'll talk about later on this morning. It talked about our ability to enhance combined defense capabilities through interoperability and readiness and through combined military exercises, enhanced missile defense, intelligence sharing, response preparations to be able to rapidly respond to any provocation from North Korea. And then it also highlighted some new areas, relatively new areas of collaboration that both countries are working on together to strengthen security, including artificial intelligence, quantum computing, cyber defenses, cyber exercises, and expanding cooperation in space security. But I think it's also important to note that the Republic of Korea and the United States have also consulted and working together for not just security on the peninsula, but within the region and the entire Indo-Pacific. And the SCM actually highlighted some of those ongoing commitments and how we're going to enhance that. It highlighted improving trilateral cooperation, planning and exercises with Japan, enhancing collaborative efforts to address the emerging threats such as enhancing maritime security and supporting regional institutions. And then finally, to sum it all up, the SCM underscored the importance of a free and open Indo-Pacific, aligning with international norms and laws. So I think clearly where both countries understand and where we are to enhance our security right now is we no longer have a great power competition, between two nations. We now have competitions between freedom-loving, human rights-believing alliances against, unfortunately, alliances that are moving in exactly the opposite direction. So alliance between China, North Korea, and Russia versus the strong ROK U.S. alliance, but also other alliances and pull together to be able to hopefully deter any security threats, and if not deter, to be prepared to quickly respond. So with that as a backdrop for this panel, let me briefly introduce the panel here. First, Minister Lee Jong-sup. The minister was a Minister of National Defense in Korea from 2022 and 2023. He also served as the Vice Chairman of the ROK JCS and the Deputy Director General for Policy Planning Bureau at the Ministry of National Defense, and the Assistant Secretary at the President's Office for Foreign Affairs and National Security. He received his PhD degree in International Relations at the University of Tennessee. Go Vols. Got two kids who went there. Next is Ambassador and Admiral Harris, commanded Indo-PACOM from 2015 to 2018, and then almost immediately became the 23rd Ambassador to the Republic of Korea from 2018 to 2021. He graduated from the U.S. Naval Academy in 1978. Go Army, beat Navy. And holds a master's degree at Harvard University, Harvard's Kennedy School of Government and Georgetown School of Foreign Service. And Alex Bell serves as the Department of State's Deputy Assistant Secretary for Nuclear Affairs in the Bureau of Arms Control, Deterrence, and Stability. And prior to that, she was the Senior Policy Director at the Center for Arms Control and Nonproliferation. And previously, she served as an advisor to the Office of the Undersecretary of State for Arms Control and International Security. And also, she was a Peace Corps volunteer from 2001 to 2003. Ms. Bell received her master's degree in international affairs at the New School in New York City. I'm sorry, I don't know what the model for the new school is. And a bachelor's degree in peace, war, and defense from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So we have we have an absolutely great panel here, and I think we will kick off with Ms. Bell, with Alex, and we're going to start the discussion about North Korea's nuclear capability. Where are they headed? And then to really talk about how are we, the alliance, working to deter and be prepared to defeat that type of threat. Over to you, Alex.
Thanks so much, and good morning to everyone, and thanks to the Korea Society for inviting me to speak about these issues. It's such a significant and pivotal moment for the U.S. ROK alliance. Last year, the United States and the ROK celebrated a momentous milestone, the 70th anniversary of our alliance. This occasion was accompanied by historic steps to strengthen our alliance in the face of continued and growing threats from the DPRK to peace and security on the peninsula and in the region. So I'll sort of take the question in reverse order and first talk about the structures we've created and the threats that we're facing. So indeed, the Washington Declaration announced by Presidents Biden and Yoon in April 2023 was a landmark commitment to strengthen extended deterrence against the DPRK. As part of the Washington Declaration, the United States and the ROK launched the Nuclear Consultative Group to increase the breadth and the depth of the alliance consultation and cooperative decision-making on nuclear deterrence issues. Since then, we have convened the NCG 3 times, soon to be a 4th, here in D.C. in early December. I represent the Department of State at the NCG, and I have witnessed its remarkable progress in less than 2 years' time. In fact, the NCG's tremendous progress has been commended and endorsed by Presidents Yoon and Biden, including the completion of the U.S. ROK guidelines for nuclear deterrence and nuclear operations on the Korean Peninsula. These guidelines were signed by the U.S. Department of Defense and the ROK Ministry of National Defense this past July. The NCG has really allowed us, as I said, to deepen cooperation, learning, and engagement among our interagency counterparts. This is a whole of government effort. One key example, the extended nuclear deterrence immersion course that the United States has been providing to interagency colleagues from the ROK government. The course has already convened 3 times over the course of a year. I've even gotten to lead a few of the sessions, and they've been really great discussions. In addition to establishing the NCG, we have continued to convene the annual undersecretary level Extended Deterrence Strategy and Consultative Group, also called the EDSCG, a bit of a mouthful for an acronym, but a very important forum that addresses regional threats to alliance deterrence using all 4 instruments of national power, the diplomatic, informational, military, and economic tools we can bring to bear to manage these challenges. In 2022, Presidents Biden and Yoon announced that the alliance would restart the EDSCG after a hiatus, and the forum has met 3 times since. Since this past September, the EDSCG included a scenario-based discussion for the first time, and we plan to continue to use the EDSCG as an opportunity for such exercises. Both the NCG and the EDSCG provide important venues for the alliance to both deter aggression and promote peace and stability on the peninsula and in the region, as well as to explore and discuss security dynamics as an alliance. At this year's U.S. ROK 2+2 meeting, held at the end of October, we included a special session specifically devoted to extended deterrence. That discussion at the highest levels of our government is so critical and something we need to continue. However, amid this remarkable progress and enhancement of our own alliance, we remain clear-eyed about the threats we are facing that necessitate our continued vigilance in strengthening alliance deterrence. Indeed, the presidents issued the Washington Declaration because they believe the DPRK's efforts to advance its unlawful and destabilizing nuclear and ballistic missile programs, as well as its dangerous nuclear rhetoric, necessitated a series of prudent steps to strengthen our extended deterrence relationship. For example, less than a month ago, the DPRK's reckless and destabilizing ICBM launch was another clear violation of multiple UN Security Council resolutions, as were all of the DPRK's ballistic missile launches in recent years. They pose a threat to regional and international peace and security and undermine the global nonproliferation regime. Furthermore, the United States assesses that the DPRK has prepared its Punggye-ri test site for its potential 7th explosive nuclear test, awaiting only a political decision to move ahead. Such a test would constitute a grave escalation of tensions in the region and present a security risk to the entire world. Each missile launch Each nuclear saber-rattling speech is an indication that the DPRK is determined to advance its unlawful WMD and ballistic missile programs, underscoring the clear need to further grow and adapt our alliance with the ROK to better prepare to defend against potential attacks, including nuclear employment. It goes without saying, the U.S. commitment to the defense of the Republic of Korea remains ironclad, and our goal remains the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Furthermore, any nuclear weapons attack by the DPRK against the Republic of Korea will be met with a swift, overwhelming, and decisive response. I must also emphasize that we are very concerned about the growing cooperation between the DPRK and Russia, including the presence of DPRK troops in Russia potentially engaging in combat operations with Russian forces. Furthermore, Russia has continued to use ballistic missile and other material unlawfully procured from the DPRK to further its illegal and unprovoked assault on Ukraine. We are also very concerned that Russia is providing military assistance to the DPRK. Make no mistake, the strength of our alliance is more important than ever amid this growing relationship between Russia and the DPRK. We also know that in today's security environment, with greater complexity and greater interconnectedness between the Indo-Pacific and the Euro-Atlantic, our efforts to maintain and strengthen deterrence must be paralleled by a continued charge toward diplomacy and dialogue to resolve difficult security challenges. I'll highlight one recent diplomatic step we took to address a cynical decision made by Russia this past spring to veto UN Security Council Resolution 1718, the UN Security Council 1718 Committee Panel of Experts mandate renewal. Before Russia's veto, the panel of experts had provided objective, comprehensive reporting and analysis of UN sanctions implementation on the DPRK. Russia's veto was a self-interested effort to bury the panel's reporting on Moscow's collusion with Pyongyang to secure weapons that Russia can use to further its aggression against Ukraine. To help fill the void in that important reporting, the United States, the Republic of Korea, and Japan joined with 8 other countries last month to announce the establishment of the Multilateral Sanctions Monitoring Team, the MSMT, as a mechanism to reinstate high-quality public reporting on noncompliance with UN sanctions on the DPRK. The MSMT aims to expand participation in the coming months and years. The establishment of this body is another example of our recognition of the significance of using all instruments of national power to address the threat emanating from the DPRK. As an alliance, we remained committed to strengthening the global nuclear nonproliferation regime. For example, the United States and the ROK maintain our enduring commitment to the Nuclear Nonproliferation Treaty, which is the bedrock of this regime. President Yoon has been clear that the ROK has no intent to develop its own nuclear weapons arsenal and continues to reaffirm its commitment to the NPT alongside the U.S. ironclad commitment to the security of the ROK. And both the United States and Republic of Korea remain committed to diplomacy. We are steadfast in our pursuit of dialogue with the DPRK without preconditions and see diplomacy as the only viable means of achieving a lasting peace on the Korean Peninsula. There's a lot to take in. I look forward to the discussion, and I also thank you so much for inviting me.
Great, thanks, Alex. I think the way we'll do this is we'll go through each one of the speakers here and then come back I've got a couple questions that we'll come back to, and then we'll open it up to audience questions as we go through here. But next, for Minister Lee, you know, as we look at the ROK-U.S. alliance and the importance of continuing to be able to strengthen that alliance, the work that is being done truly gets at how do you become and be able to secure and stable region in Northeast Asia. And so, Minister, if you could talk a little bit about what you think and your thoughts are as far as how do we strengthen this military alliance, this security alliance, to be able to face the challenges of the future.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to see all participants today, including Ambassador Cho and General Sharp, who worked for restoration of the ROK-US alliance, and to have a discussion regarding the future of the alliance. As General Sharp mentioned earlier, DPRK challenges have been transitioned into nuclear threats that might disrupt global non-proliferation regime, as well as undermining survivability of the alliance. Furthermore, considering military cooperation between Russia and DPRK, such threats are expanding as global threats beyond the Korean Peninsula. Therefore, I believe that what is the most important for peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula is to strengthen deterrence and response posture against DPRK's nuclear and missile threats, while deepening cooperation with the international community and partners. To this end, there is an increased need for strengthening extended deterrence, strengthening ROK 3K defense system, and regional security cooperation. First, regarding extended deterrence, a change from the unilateral extended deterrence to the extended deterrence in an integrated manner brings a significant meaning in terms of reflecting voices and roles of the ROK in extended deterrence. This will enhance the ROK public's credibility in extended deterrence and enable to deliver a stronger message to Kim Jong-un regime. The core of the extended deterrence in an integrated manner is to establish CNI plans, which integrate and operate ROK conventional assets and U.S. nuclear capabilities, and to be prepared to execute such plans in contingency. Meanwhile, it should be noted that U.S. administration transition should not weaken ROK-U.S. coordination and become an obstacle for the alliance's development into the extended deterrence in an integrated manner. Possible impediments might deteriorate credibility in U.S. commitment to extended deterrence, causing crisis to the NPT regime and raising possibilities of undesired options to both ROK and U.S. coming on a table. My second point is modernizing the ROK military capabilities. The core of modernizing ROK military capabilities is strengthening the ROK 3K defense system, which consists of kill chain, KMD, and KMPR. Major weapon systems regarding the ROK 3K defense system are developed and produced by ROK ADD and the defense industry, which I believe is significant in two aspects with respect to the ROK's capability in defense industry. First of all, such weapon systems can be exported to the U.S.'s allies and partners and utilized to deter and respond to challenges against U.S.-led international order. Secondly, enhancing ROK defense industry capabilities will create conditions to expand ROK-U.S. cooperation in defense industry. Such expansion will enhance interoperability and interchangeability of the ROK and U.S. military. Furthermore, such enhancement could lead to the strengthening of the alliance. In this regard, the new U.S. administration should put its focus on expanding cooperation rather than competition in the field of defense industry. To this end, reciprocal defense procurement agreement needs to be swiftly signed. President-elect Trump underscored the need for cooperation in building ships with the ROK. It implies defense industry cooperation between two nations can play a certain role in enhancing resilience of the U.S. defense industry. Regarding development of regional security cooperation, the role of allies and partners is key in terms of regional security cooperation. In this regard, there are some concerns about the expectations that the new U.S. administration might demand great burden sharing and cost sharing from allies. President-elect Trump's perspective on defense cost sharing is notably unique. Differing from the special measures agreement that U.S. allies have implemented over several decades. Applying his concept to relationship with allied countries would be inappropriate and could risk creating friction in the ROK-U.S. relationship. The benefits of alliances should consider not only economic interest, but also security and strategic interest for each country. For example, by stationing troops on the Korean Peninsula, the U.S. also gains significant strategic benefit. Ignoring this and focusing only on economic aspects would send the wrong signal. A new concept of defense cost sharing should not hinder the trust and development established over the 70 years. Instead of simply viewing burden sharing as cost sharing, it's now essential to recognize it as security sharing to strategically utilize alliance capabilities. Lastly, we hope that the launch of the new U.S. administration will be an opportunity to demonstrate a stronger resolve of the alliance to Kim Jong-un regime, especially with the shared awareness of the DPRK threats and their various institutional mechanisms developed over the past 70 years. We look forward to further strengthening of the ROK-U.S. alliance. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And next, Admiral Harris. We've talked a little bit about the importance of the ROK-U.S. alliance on the peninsula and in the region. If I could ask you to address how this alliance helps and where it needs to go in order to be able to help provide security and stability really throughout the whole Indo-Pacific region.
Thanks, and thanks to the Korea Society for putting this together. And I'm honored to be up here with this panel of experts. I'm an amateur, so I'm just glad to be here at all. Let me think about what General Sharp asked me. The things that I think that we need to do are outlined well in the SCM outcome, right? And so, but you know, there's so many things that need to be done. There's so many threats, so many issues that it's easy to sort of pick at the SCM outcome, the joint communique, and point at what's not there. But I think if you look at the SCM in its totality, and you consider what Ambassador Cho said in his remarks, which I found to be extraordinary. Thank you for those remarks. I think it covers everything that needs to be done. But since I'm up here on a panel, I will pick at the SCM just a tad, and just say what wasn't mentioned in it, though what wasn't mentioned in it was actually covered by Ambassador Cho. I would like to see a strong, positive reaffirmation of the Washington Declaration in its totality, not just the nuclear consultative piece of it, which Secretary Bell covered very well, but the totality of the Washington Declaration and all those parts of it. I think it's an extraordinary document, and I would like to see the Trump administration when it comes into office, reaffirmed that with Korea. I could not agree more with any statement made today than Ambassador Cho's statement that our alliance is more important than ever. Not only is it important to us, but the world demands strong action by our alliance, and I couldn't agree more with him. We should call out China for the malign country that it is. We should not walk away from criticizing China for all the bad things that it does, not only in the East China Sea, but the South China Sea, especially the South China Sea these days, and globally. So I think that would be helpful. The SCM talked about the trilateral relationship between South Korea, Japan, and the United States, which is vitally important. And I'm so pleased to see that the trilateral relationship has improved over time, especially in the last couple of years. But I would like to see more in the bilateral relationship between Japan and South Korea. The presence just last week, I believe, of a South Korean Navy destroyer in Japan, where the Japanese defense minister actually walked on board, that's amazing when you consider the recent history of the relationship over the past decade or so. So that is a positive step in the absolute right direction, in my view, and I'd like to see more of it. And I believe that South Korea is becoming a strong player on the global stage, and I would encourage continued involvement in what's happening in Southwest Asia, in the Red Sea, as well as in Eastern Europe. So thank you for that. I do believe in the overall scheme of things that Kim Jong-un wants four things, and I've talked about this often in speeches that I've given over time. I think he wants to keep his nukes. He wants to end the sanctions. He wants to split the alliance, and he wants to dominate the peninsula. I don't think he's wavered at all on that. He's told us clearly what his intent is. Now, I was a diplomat for a little bit of time, not too much time over the arc of my career, but I came to firmly believe that diplomacy and diplomats matter. But that notwithstanding, I don't believe that Kim Jong-un will ever give up his nuclear weapons. And I think it's naive to think that we can negotiate him away from those nuclear weapons. You know, Maya Angelou once said that if a person shows you who they are, we'll believe them the first time, right? And so Kim Jong-un has shown us who he is over and over again. And shame on us if we don't believe it. So I think the time for diplomacy and negotiations with Kim Jong-un is over. I think it's time to recognize the clear threat that comes from North Korea, as Kim Jong-un has threatened and demonstrated over and over again. And the time is to arm up. The time is to increase our military readiness, our alliance readiness together, to face the threat that comes from North Korea and apply whatever resources that task requires, because that is the future, in my opinion, for the peninsula, and a strong South Korea, U.S. alliance will diminish the threat, not increase it, in my opinion. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Harry. So I'll have a couple follow-on questions, and then, as I said earlier, there'll be an audience time to be able to ask questions. We have plenty of time left. So if you go first to Ms. Bell, can you talk a little bit about where you, in the deterrence side, where is China in all of this equation? They have been, fairly quiet. We've been talking about Russia. We've been talking about, changing of technology and all of that. I think clearly China does not want, North Korea to start shooting off nukes or that. But how can we utilize that to play into deterrence of North Korea from, pushing China. What are your thoughts on where China stands with what North Korea is doing?
I don't think they like it. While they're not particularly expressive on that point, we can see it in multilateral fora. I think they particularly noted the statement that Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov made about a month ago, that he considered the North Korea nuclear issue to be a settled matter. Well, that's news to the rest of us on the Security Council, who passed resolution after resolution saying this is in contravention of international law, the non-proliferation regime, and their obligations to the NPT. So I think that's a potential wedge issue that may have not been there before between Russia and the PRC. And so, we plan to sort of push the Chinese on this in the fora that we do have remaining, and demand that they opine on this particular issue, but also that Russia has to defend and explain its position as a member of the Security Council, as a country that voted for these resolutions over and over again, and their own commitment to the global non-proliferation regime, which they seem to generally not seem to be as worried about of late, but the Chinese still care. The Chinese still want to be seen as a responsible actor, as a responsible nuclear actor in the global space. And so I think they should be made to account for this. Of course, they themselves are pursuing an unprecedented and at this point unchecked nuclear buildup that they refuse to acknowledge. Though, as I've often liked to tell them, I can see these new silos with commercially available satellite imagery. I can see the expansion of your weapons production facilities, your fissile material production facilities with commercially available satellite imagery. I can see activity at their Lopnor nuclear test site with commercially available satellite imagery. So if you were not building up your nuclear arsenal, tell me what you were doing. We've yet to get an answer there, but it's a complex process that I think is going to require, again, a whole of government response and a response from the international community. But I think in particular, when it comes back to the North Korea issue, it's a problem that China wishes it did not have to deal with right now, and particularly the growing relationship between Russia and the DPRK and how that destabilizes China's own relationship with Pyongyang. So a lot of work to do for the next administration, but a lot of work to do for the global community. It's not enough to say you support the non-proliferation regime and the NPT. You actually have to put action and words behind that, and that means accounting for what continues to be a blatant violation of that regime in terms of North Korea's nuclear program, and China has a responsibility to account for that as well.
So one more question. We talked a lot about the NCG and what we're doing there. Can you just briefly touch on, from a regional perspective, our other allies in the region and how we're working together, for nuclear deterrence with Japan, Australia, and others in the region?
Yeah, absolutely. I co-chair the Extended Deterrence Dialogue with Japan. I agree that the trilateral conversations that we've had are particularly important and will be more important as we go forward. There is no sort of threat or action that DPRK could take forward that doesn't affect countries around the region. There is no sort of, it's just an issue between ROK and the United States and DPRK. There are going to be ripple effects of any potential hostile action. So having conversations, understanding what we need to do to prepare for such such an action, deter such an action, requires that cooperative approach. So I think that needs to be expanded. We also have a strategic policy dialogue with the Australians that continues to move forward, and we've also taken a lot of steps to engage broader, conversations in the region in the form of the ASEAN Regional Forum on Nonproliferation and Disarmament. We were actually a co-chair for the previous 3 years, along with Thailand and Sri Lanka, and that is a conversation that has largely been about people wanting to see more advancement in disarmament and arms control, and we very clearly brought the message to that forum that we have a lot of security challenges that require deterrence, and we have a lot of impediments in the way of what you would like to see in terms of advancing in arms control and disarmament, and really engaging on a one-on-one level. I actually, my colleague out in the audience there, Maggie, and I have been throughout Southeast Asia taking this message directly to capitals, and I think that kind of work has to continue. We can't rely on people to read our nice speeches and to hear what we're saying in the UN and other venues. We have to show up in capital. We have to describe the threat. We have to describe what we're doing to manage that threat, and we have to tell countries why they need to be working with us.
Great, thank you. Minister, you talked very well about how to strengthen security-wise, military-wise, the ROK-U.S. alliance and our capabilities on the peninsula. But your thoughts on how to expand that trilaterally? You know, we've just really recently started the trilateral exercises, the planning and all with Japan. But your thoughts on some specific ways to be able to strengthen the military part of, I won't call it an alliance yet, but the military work of the trilateral between the Republic of Korea, United States, and Japan? Because I think we all would say, you know, if anything's going to happen on the peninsula with North Korea, it's not going to be just, you know, north-south. It's going to be a regional fight to include Japan and probably others. But your thoughts on, you know, the progress we're making to strengthen ROK-U.S. Japan capabilities and ideas on how to strengthen that even more in the future?
Thank you for the questions. I think the key of the security cooperation in the region is ROK, U.S., and Japan security cooperation, which has been expanded already. I believe there is we need to think about two aspects from the ROK, U.S., Japan cooperation, in terms, especially in the military exercise. First one is it has very strong message toward China, and another aspect is toward North Korea to deter any kind of provocation like that. Recently, the level of the military exercise is more active and more diverse than previous period. In the future, I believe, of course, there is some concerning about the level of the military exercise, but I believe it will be expanded in more diverse and more active ways.
Great, thank you. And Harry, if I could ask you to put your Indo-Pacific commander hat back on for a second. Can you talk a little bit about, from, you know, that perspective? Again, as I said a minute ago, if there's conflict in the Pacific, it's not going to be to one little area. It's going to be pretty expansive across the Indo-Pacific. How we look at enhancing and both deterring and then be prepared to respond to truly, you know, a Taiwan, a North Korea, you know, a Russia, all being involved kind of near simultaneous. How do we try to deter that, and more importantly, how do we plan to be able to react to those types of things with alliances that we have in our forming out there?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Skip. So I'm sure I don't have to tell this audience, but the United States has only 5 bilateral treaties in the whole wide world, bilateral defense treaties. They're all in the Indo-Pacific. That's South Korea, Japan, Australia, Thailand, and the Philippines. So when I was in command of PACOM, I focused on the flashpoint that was, in my mind, the East China Sea and Taiwan. And that was going to be the flashpoint that would put us in conflict with China. I think today in November 2024, that flashpoint has now moved south, and it's in the South China Sea, and it involves the Philippines. The Philippines is a sovereign country. They have a 200-mile EEZ, of which the majority of their EEZ to the west of the Philippines is actually claimed by China. China claims the entirety of the South China Sea as an inland waterway, and they view it like we would view the Great Salt Lake or something. They think that is their territorial water. That body of water is as big as the United States. And it's crazy, preposterous really, when you think that the South China Sea would be a territorial water space of a single country. And so the Philippines is standing up to the PRC, to China now, in their EEZ, and that is a dangerous flashpoint when China employs its gray zone tactics, its China Coast Guard, and that kind of thing. And when you consider that the Philippines' treaty ally is us, so that becomes problematic. And so I think that strengthening that alliance is important. I've already talked about strengthening the ROK-U.S. alliance and all of our alliances in the Indo-Pacific. But even perhaps not as important, but almost equally worth consideration are the other groupings that we have in the Indo-Pacific, which can serve as a brake, if you will, on some of the aggressive behavior by other countries. And one of those is the Quad. That's the Quadrilateral Defense Alliance, or Quadrilateral Defense Relationship between Australia, Japan, India, and the United States. It's not a defense alliance. It's not NATO. I don't think there'll ever be a NATO in Asia. We tried that once with CETO, Southeast Asia Treaty Organization. That didn't end really well. But the Quad has opportunities, has potential, I think, to be a global force for good. Certainly a regional force for good. And I have argued that Korea should become a member of the Quad. The problem with that is there's no structure to the Quad, right? There's no secretariat for the Quad. There's no entity by which papers are written and the leaders get together and decide to do this, that, or the other thing. So I've also argued that we need to have a Quad secretariat placed someplace in the region. And importantly, there's no mechanism for new entrants into the Quad. So I have no idea how South Korea, Indonesia, the UK, how any of those countries could become a member of the Quad. I will note that if you follow American college football, the Big 12 used to have, 12 teams. It's got 18 teams now, and it's still the Big 12. So nothing says the Quad has to have only 4 teams. Right? So I think there's an opportunity there. I just don't know how South Korea could actually become a member of the Quad because there's no mechanism for that. AUKUS is another one. That's the Australia, UK, US relationship, the end state of which would be an independent nuclear submarine force in Australia. So I can't wait for the time when we'll see a nuclear submarine with Australian colors somewhere underway in the Indo-Pacific. But there's a pillar 2 to AUKUS, and that pillar 2 is a technological pillar. Japan is becoming a part of pillar 2, and I would hope to see Korea as a part of pillar 2 as well, because of your technological capability and your alliance relationships. So those are 2 things that in the Indo-Pacific, I think give China pause, and we should see more of that. So I'll stop there, save you time.
You actually preempted my other question for you. I was going to have you put your ambassador hat on, which you just did, and talked about the regional institutions to be able to do that. So with that, let me throw it open to the audience here. And if somebody just raise your hand and somebody will come over with a microphone. And I do ask you to please be conscious of time we have here, and please ask a question so that the audience can, or the panel can answer it. And if you want to direct it to anyone specifically on the panel, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll designate somebody to start answering it. I think we have one right up. I'm sorry. Please also identify yourself and where you're from.
Michael Macetic, PBS Online NewsHour. One number that hasn't come up in this discussion is that 66% of the South Korean population wants to develop a nuclear deterrent. And for all the acronyms and declarations and everything, extended deterrence is based on trust. In Europe in the 60s, General de Gaulle did not believe the United States would sacrifice New York for Paris. Under Ambassador Harris's previous predecessor, Phil Habib, South Korea came within months of developing nuclear capability. Doesn't all this boil down to trust? And if the trust is eliminated, South Korea, within months or weeks, could develop its own nuclear deterrent.
So I'll start the answer there. I may fail in my quest, but I'll try to answer your question. So I've spoken about this before, and I could not agree more. The theory of extended nuclear deterrence is fundamentally one of trust. And if we fail to garner South Korea's trust or Japan's trust or any other country's trust, then what is to prevent them from becoming an independent nuclear power, even though the ROK is a leader in the non-proliferation regime, the NPT regime. So other than breaking its own word to its own people and the rest of the world, I guess there's nothing that would prevent them from going forward if we don't demonstrate that we're serious about extending nuclear deterrence to South Korea. And that's why I started off my answer to the previous two questions ago, that I hope to see a public reaffirmation of the Washington Declaration in totality, not just one piece of it or another piece of it or whatever, but the whole thing. The Washington Declaration is a fundamentally important outcome of talks last year, and I think that the reaffirmation of that by the new team coming into Washington would help allay those concerns that the South Koreans have that that the U.S. Word is not solid, if you will.
I'll just add, I think polls are somewhat, framed by the way the question is being asked. And I think there are a lot of ways to ask this question. And I really do think that if you asked a full question about, would you want to pursue an indigenous nuclear weapons program, or and sort of have to deal with all the consequences that would come from such a decision, including, as was said, a violation of their own commitment to the NPT. That's a slightly different answer that you might get, but it is a deeper conversation than just should we get a program or not. And I think the fact that Presidents Yoon and Biden have repeatedly reaffirmed the longstanding commitment to our mutual obligations under the NPT as the cornerstone of the nonproliferation regime is one that's worth noting. This has happened again and again, including in the Washington Declaration, that outlines both the commitment to the NPT, but also the need for stronger, better coordinated extended deterrence conversations. As I said before, our commitment is ironclad, and I think in terms of what we can do with the EDSCG and NCG is continue to broaden the discussion with the ROK population about what we're doing to better coordinate our extended deterrence commitments, how we will deal with these challenges together using both our nuclear extended deterrent but also conventional means to deal with the challenges we face, and really get the message across that our alliance makes us stronger. It makes us both stronger, and that the threats posed by China, by Russia, by North Korea affects us all. And no country can meet these challenges alone. We need each other, and we need to work together, and that's how we will maintain and strengthen security and protect our respective people. And it is through the mechanisms that we've created, like the ADSCG, like the NCG, and we will continue to work to make them stronger. And I do think that any incoming administration would see the strength of what we have created together, and as we've seen many times before, when good ideas happen in administrations, they get carried forward, like the Proliferation Security Initiative that was carried from the Bush administration over and continues today, like the International Partnership for Nuclear Disarmament Verification, like the creating the environment for nuclear disarmament forum that was created during the Trump administration, and this administration has carried it forward. I think these are the conversations that need to go forward, that the NCG and what we've been doing is something worth preserving and worth strengthening in the future.
Yeah, I definitely can say extended deterrence is based on the trust between two countries. That's why every year SCM communique contains that statement. And I mentioned earlier, extended deterrence in an integrated manner can raise the level of the trust and the commitment of the United States. If I can say currently, at this point, I think it's too early to think about and talk about other options. However, if there's any kind of this credibility is going up, you may think of some other options. But currently, at this point, it's not yet. That's what I'm thinking.
I'll just add one thing. Trust has two components: willingness to use and capability. And we've talked a lot about willingness to use, but what's been done over the last couple of years, I think, has also increased capability, both from a, not just a planning, but a real ability to be able to see, be able to react very, very quickly. And I would think that the people of South Korea, but more importantly, the people of, or Kim Jong-un himself, understands that extended deterrence composes both of those, and both trust and capability have greatly increased, I think, over the last couple of years. Next question. Over here.
So I'll start that because I may be the only one on the panel that believes that Kim Jong-un is not going to give up his weapons. I won't speak for my colleagues on the panel. But I think that if you assume, as I do, that Kim Jong-un will never give up his weapons or his development program and his quest to develop a means to deliver them accurately against a target like the Mayflower Hotel, for example, as opposed to the United States writ large, right? And I think that the relationship with Russia is probably giving him that kind of technology. So once he has that technology, he's certainly not going to give it up. I mean, if you were him, would you give it up? I guess is the question. So what we have to do is strengthen our alliance, continue to strengthen the alliance, continue to maintain a high degree of readiness, continue to do those joint exercises that enable us to stay on the razor's edge of capability together. So we lost that opportunity in the previous administration, and I think it set us back a few years. But I believe, I don't know because I'm not watching it closely, but I believe that our readiness levels are high again. And that's the answer. The answer is to be ready to respond to threats from the North from any direction and any degree of complexity. And I think that's the answer. Then continue to isolate North Korea. Do not give in on sanctions. Continue to pressurize China to do the right thing in international fora. And the likelihood of that seems to me to be decreasing, but there's always hope for that. I guess hope would be a course of action in that regard. Continue to pressurize Russia. Continue to support Ukraine, which pressurizes Russia at no cost to the United States other than fiscal cost, and things like that, which places pressure on this grouping, this quadrilateral grouping between Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea, and continues to further our alliance, in my opinion.
Denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula has been the U.S. Policy for the past 5 administrations, and I assume that would continue. That's also the global policy as written into various UN Security Council resolutions calling for complete, verifiable, and irreversible disarmament of the North Korean program. I admit we are going into the 6th administration trying to figure out how to manage and contain, control, and roll back this program. But it doesn't mean there's not a way. We simply haven't identified it yet. We have the technical means available to us. We have a lot of experience, experts throughout the government that would know how to do the technical measures involved in rolling back this program. We have a lot of source material in terms of what has worked and not worked in previous arms control and nonproliferation agreements. We can continue to prepare ourselves for when and if there is a moment to move forward in a diplomatic process, notwithstanding the great challenges that would be, in the face of such an undertaking. But what I think we need to do, and maybe this comes from being an arms controller, and I think inherently, if you work in arms control, you have to be an optimist. But generally driven by the idea that just because we haven't identified a solution here in the past doesn't mean we're incapable of doing it in the future. But as I said before, it's not something that one country can do. South Korea cannot do it on its own. The United States and South Korea need more help, more access, pressure from China, a global reckoning with what is happening with China, with Russia's relationship and growing relationship with the DPRK. We cannot keep ignoring this problem. And I, don't want to see the United States continue to walk into multilateral fora, and particularly with regards to the NPT, where we keep sort of focusing on these nice to have issues and ignoring this very gaping wound in the nonproliferation regime that has continued to grow worse over time. We have to confront the problem. We do have to have a strong military deterrent to deal with the problem. It's not simply a matter of hoping this problem will go away. This is a serious military threat to the United States, to its allies, to the entire world. But we also have to think through, again, using those other levers of national power, both ours and the global communities, to find a solution finally to this problem.
Kim Jong-un will not give up denuclearization. Yes, I agree that. However, he is not going to give up denuclearization forever. The answer may be different. If he is not going to give up denuclearization forever, then U.S. Policy of denuclearization should be discarded. So in the future, nobody definitely can say he's not going to give up forever. So one of the Rok policy is audacious initiative, which means in the future, maybe someday, it can happen. So when it will be happen like that? So it may be when Kim Jong-un realized that the cost of having nuclear and missile capabilities is much higher than or greater than when he does not have, when the nuclearization is made.
So I'll just follow on a little bit with what the minister just said on my thoughts. I agree, Kim Jong-un, as he currently is not going to give up nuclear weapons. So how do you get rid of nuclear weapons? Either the regime changes, or you force the regime to change its policies and what it believes to be most important. And I think that, you know, obviously one side of it is what we've all been talking about, you know, the entire time up here, is be very, very strong, be very, very capable, not just as a country, not just as a Republic of Korea, U.S. alliance, but throughout the whole Pacific. Have those external capabilities, those external strength to be able to try to really push to get him to understand that the capability is really not going to do him any good from a military perspective type of thing. But I do think the other part of it that is necessary, that I really don't think we have been working nearly as hard to do it, is how do you then get some internal pressure within North Korea to either change the regime or to change the regime's policies. And I know that's hard, but I think the missing component that we have had and still have today is we've really never been able to paint a picture to ourselves, much less the people of North Korea. What does a reunified, denuclearized peninsula look like to the people of North Korea from their perspective? You can't just say, look at South Korea and look how great it is with all the, you know, the economy, the standard of living and all of that, and trust us, people of North Korea, if you reunify, that could be you someday. I really think that we need to have lots of discussions about, from a people perspective, what does it look like? From a military perspective, you know, I can tell you right now, the military in North Korea think that if there's a reunified peninsula, they're going to be out on the streets with no jobs. The regime people just underneath Kim Jong-un, and even probably the mayors and all in the cities of North Korea, think if there's a reunified peninsula, a lot of them are going to jail. They're all have lost their power and any influence and all of that. So, you know, what I've been saying is we need to come to some agreement about what does the end state look like and how do we get there. Then I think we can start crafting, because I believe strongly in the eye of DIME, to be able to get information into North Korea and to be able to start fermenting, because I mean, Kim Jong-un's biggest fear, I think, is his people and keeping them in control. And so to be able to push to be able to do that, I think, is another component of how you eventually get to denuclearization, because I really think the only way that actually happens is through a reunified peninsula in the end. One more, we have time for on this panel, one more question back here in the back. Just speak up, Steve, we'll hear you.
They wanted all of them. Okay, Steve Lee from the Korea Defense Veterans Association. So KDVA is very thankful for our partnership with the Korea Society. Thank you for inviting us. So when people ask me about what's ahead with the Trump 2.0 administration, I basically advise, I think it's going to be a bumpy road, not necessarily always good or always bad. I also say please don't overreact to initial comments. So for the panel, what is your practical advice to our two governments about the next few years? And then the second part of it is, so we have a very diverse group of audience members here from different organizations. What can we do to perhaps help the process be less bumpy?
Do you want to start it?
No, really.
Okay. Well, I'll start it then. I think the advice, first off, to Korea is this should not be transactional. It shouldn't be one item. You know, if one to start talking about the SMA, just don't do it. I think that if Korea should be pointing out, here is what Korea does, not just militarily wise, but here's what Korea does for peace and security, but more importantly, here's what Korea is doing to help you, President Trump, accomplish what you want to accomplish, both in the United States and around the world. And there's so much that Korea is doing along all elements to be able to do that. We've talked, shipbuilding. We've talked about, Camp Humphreys, the largest base that the United States, anywhere outside of the United States, is just across the Yellow Sea from China. And, what they're doing to be able to bring business here to Korea, and to point out to President Trump that the Republic of Korea is really working hard to be able to do what we need to do in the region, security and stability, but it also is doing what the U.S., it's helping the U.S. and President Trump already doing what they want to accomplish, and then maybe point out some other things that they could do to be able to help him to be able to accomplish that as we go through. And I think for the other part of your question on the organizations around here, I think there's not a single person in this room that does not understand the importance of the Korea-U.S. alliance from all perspectives, militarily, diplomatically, economically, and to be able to just continue to push the importance of that alliance, not just for stability around the world, but to the United States.
So I think it's natural that tactics and approaches change from administration to administration. But I think overall, if you look at the security space, there's a remarkable amount of consistency, and our goals actually remain the same. In the case of North Korea, managing and dealing with the nonproliferation threat posed by the North Korean, dealing with that nonproliferation challenge that has been the goal of so many administrations, will remain the same, and, as well as the defense and safety of our respective peoples and alliance. I think, again, in terms of consistency, the Trump administration nuclear posture review clearly stated that should the Kim regime launch a nuclear attack, that would be the end of that regime, and that exact language appears again in the 2022 Biden NPR. There is a consistent approach there in terms of how we need to deal with this challenge and the very clear and direct manner in which the United States would deal with this challenge. So I think, again, consistency has been a hallmark of our approach to security challenges. And so I think, taking that going forward and then maintaining constant and thorough communication channels, and make sure that we're sharing concerns, that we're sharing information, that we're sharing goals and sort of processes that we want to work on together. That's the way to go forward.
I'll just take the easy way out and associate myself with the previous two speakers. Thank you.
Anything else, Minister? Well, again, perfect timing. I want to really thank my panel members here. I think this has been a great discussion, and look forward to the next panel as we talk more broadly about the ROK-U.S. alliance into the future. So thank you all very much.
Thank you to the wonderful security panel. That was a really great conversation. Hi, everyone. We're going to jump right into the next discussion. My name is Chelsea Alexander, and I'm the Policy Program Officer at the Korea Society. Thank you all for joining us today. It's my pleasure to now introduce the moderator of our diplomacy panel. I'd like to invite the panelists to please take their place on stage as I do so. In the 1970s, Ambassador Kathleen Stevens was a Peace Corps volunteer in Korea. Following her time there, she went on to be a career diplomat in the United States Foreign Service from 1978 to 2015. Ambassador Stevens served as the U.S. Ambassador to the Republic of Korea from 2008 to 2011, the first woman and first Korean speaker in that position. Her other overseas assignments included postings to Trinidad and Tobago, China, former Yugoslavia, Portugal, Northern Ireland, and India. Ambassador Stevens served in a number of policy positions in Washington at the Department of State and the White House. She has served as president and CEO of the Korea Economic Institute of America from 2018 to 2023. She is board vice chair of the Asia Foundation, and we are proud to call her the Korea Society, the board chair of the Korea Society. So please join me in welcoming Ambassador Stevens and her fellow speakers in the diplomacy panel as they make it onto stage. Yeah, and I will turn it over to her to introduce our guests. Thank you.
Chelsea, thank you. And while we sit down here, and thanks for the introduction, I know people need a moment maybe to get a coffee and take a break and settle in. So, well, please do so, and we'll slowly settle in as well. Well, good morning, everyone. And while everyone is settling back in after that excellent first session, maybe I'll prolong what sometimes people call the throat clearing, which is what I think my job is to do before we really get into discussion. But I want to also express my pleasure in being here today to join this gathering. I feel like our first discussion this morning with the panel was very well bookended by Ambassador Cho's laying out of the major themes and the extraordinary energy and activity in the U.S.-Korea relationship, certainly over the last several years, but going back obviously over even a longer period of time, and I would say over changes of government in both countries. And then bookended by Colonel Steve Lee's question at the end about the way forward. And I guess I'd like to kind of use this wonderful panel that I have the privilege of moderating today to kind of continue that discussion. I have a few areas that I've asked them to focus on. But as I think about, well, again, the last few years and even the last few weeks and the comments we've heard already today, it really is striking. And again, I think we do all agree that the U.S.-Korea relationship, the alliance, has become broader, deeper, more important, and yes, maybe more important than ever. And as I see the people in this audience, I also recognize how much more deeply rooted it's become in this audience and beyond. We were just in New York earlier this week to do another conference in our business communities, in our obvious security communities, in every respect throughout the United States. And that's important. But I also think we have to realize that we are in a period of, I think we're calling it, geopolitical flux or other words like that, but of potential disruption and change, where there'll be perhaps some continuity, but I think there's also a theme of disruption, of challenge as well as opportunity, both in the context of the changing geopolitical environment and the U.S. election and changes elsewhere as well. So what I want to do is, as people come back in and settle down, is briefly introduce our three distinguished panelists today. I'll give you a little bit of a sense of what I've asked them to talk about, but I think they should talk about whatever they want to based on what they've heard so far. And what I'll probably try to do with this panel, if it's possible, as we're kind of lined up here, is make it a bit of a conversation. And if it's all right with you all, that after each person makes some initial comments, that I'll give a chance. I may have a comment, but for the others to make a little bit of a comment on that particular topic, and then we'll kind of round back at the end, as we did with the previous panel, with some discussion among ourselves and most importantly with all of you who've joined us in the audience today. So first, our panelists. I think you have in your material for this conference their full bios. I'm not going to, I wouldn't have time to go through all of it, but I think we have a very distinguished panel here. First of all, my longtime, if I may say, friend and maybe even a mentor. He certainly provided me with great advice during my time in Korea as a diplomat. The former Republic of Korea Foreign Minister, Yoon Byung-se. I understand that he was you were foreign minister after my time in Korea as ambassador, but a lifelong diplomat, held many positions within the South Korean diplomatic corps, from working in the president's office to many key missions abroad. But he has the distinction still now of being the longest serving Minister of Foreign Affairs since 1981. So he was Minister of Foreign Affairs from 2013 to 2017. And still very active after all that, looking very well, and playing a very important role. He contributes regularly to South Korean press, commentary, is a frequent speaker at conferences that we have both here and in Korea, and we're very, very honored that he's been able to join us today. I think in order of speaking, although not in order of sitting, but in order of speaking, I think we're going to ask Victor Cha to speak next, although you can see we really arranged this very formally. I think, again, Dr. Cha, especially here in Washington, anywhere doesn't need a lengthy introduction, but he is president of the Geopolitics and Foreign Policy Department. I know him better as also the Korea chair at, of course, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS. But I think it's kind of cool, actually, that we have someone who's so deeply steeped and such a scholar of U.S.-Korea relations, also as president of Geopolitics and Foreign Policy writ large. You're kind of a one-man global pivotal scholar. He's also, of course, a professor at Georgetown University. He serves during the Biden administration on the Defense Policy Board and in a number of other capacities, and also served at the National Security Council during the George W. Bush administration, which is when I first met him. I'm sorry, I'm being very brief here. Katrin Katz is also joining us. Dr. Katz is, first of all, I have to brag that she has we're proud that she has a Korea Society Association. I should say Victor does too. He's on our board. Dr. Katrin is our first Van Fleet non-resident senior fellow. Can I say that you live in Florida? So we get her up here for these things. She's a tremendous scholar in the U.S.-Korea relations space. She is also, at a different time, a little later on, was a director for Japan, Korea, and Oceanic Affairs at the National Security Council, 2007 to 2008. Actually, it's a similar time. Were you together? I'm sorry, I'm learning things, okay.
Big shoes to fill.
Yeah, okay. You're a successor, great. Peaceful transfer of power. Yeah, okay. And again, many, many academic awards, a very distinguished scholar, and always very thoughtful. So what I've done is I've kind of asked each of them an overall area, and I've asked Foreign Minister Yoon to kick off with, we're lucky he's flown in here from Seoul, with essentially, very simplistically, how do things look from Seoul? What is the kind of South Korean foreign policy overview as the Yoon administration is at its halfway point, and as we approach a change of government here in the United States? I saw that Foreign Minister Yoon has certainly emphasized, and this is very much drawing from his own career, supported and led and emphasized the importance of Korea continuing to engage globally, not only with respect to the alliance, but its own position and growing position in the world. Many multilateral engagements, we'll talk more about that. And then I'm going to ask Dr. Cha to talk a little bit about, he could talk about anything, but the Korean Peninsula, in particular North Korea policy and prospects for that, and Dr. Katz to talk about, in more depth, the tremendous steps that have been taken in the U.S. Rok Japan relationship, the trilateral relationship, as well as something was touched on in the earlier panel, the bilateral relationship, in this case meaning Japan and Korea, as well as the trilateral. But let's start it off then with Foreign Minister Yoon Byung-se. Again, welcome and thank you for making the trip.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Ambassador Stevens, for your very kind introduction. And it's my great pleasure to attend this very timely and significant Korea Society Policy Conference. Well, as you have heard, that actually this session 1 security panel preempted what we have to discuss at the session 2 to a certain extent. But instead of talking about the specific topics, I'd rather give you or put all these various elements in a very broad context, which is the title of this session 2. How can we see all these dots or developments in the regional and the global context? You know, when I met with my counterpart in EU some months ago, this gentleman said, fire everywhere. Yes, meaning Ukraine war, Gaza war, East China Sea, South China Sea, Korean Peninsula, climate change, almost everything. So now, there was a time, very happy era, when we talked about single factor or double factor worries for Koreans, only North Korean issues. But now, that era has changed. We have so many elements on the same plate. So, if we confine our eyes to only peninsula issues, we cannot understand this connection between these peninsula issues and other issues in the Indo-Pacific region or in the Eurasia or in the world. So, I think this sense of the purpose has started sometime since the President Lee Myung-bak's era and the President Park Geun-hye's era. Then now, I think this Yoon Suk-yeol government is seized this opportunity to put forward its own very ambitious proposal or strategy in two ways. One is Global Pivotal Initiative, GPS. The other is Indo-Pacific Strategy Report. So this is very much commensurate with our growing capability and status in the global arena, in the regional arena. Actually, what Cassie asked us is about Korea's role. But I think the title, the theme of this session and her question involves three different dimensions. Number one is about what kind of role Korea can do in this regional and global challenges. Number two is what the alliance, Korea-US alliance can do now and in the future to address all these geopolitical transformation. Number three is, even though there are so many risks on the plate already, now the presidential election is over in the United States. We have a Trump 2.0 in 2 months' time. So what are the implications of this Trump 2.0 on the regional and the global setting, not to mention this Korea-US alliance? So this is the kind of my thinking about how we should approach this one. On the first thing, on the Korea's role, regardless of these tectonic changes in the world, already South Korea has grown very steadily to the extent that many of our colleagues in the United States or in Europe call South Korea a whale, no longer a shrimp. That means Korea should shoulder more responsibility commensurate with its capability and newly gained status. So there are a lot of talks about this possible joining by the South Korea to G8, G7 plus, something like that. But my advice to the current government has always been that, well, you know, in the diplomatic circle, you should recognize one maxim: be at the table or be on the menu. This is a very fierce battle in the diplomatic arena. And Yoon Suk-yeol government is doing a very superb job in that, unilaterally, regionally, interregionally, and globally. From NATO summit to latest G20 and APEC summit, they are doing a very great job. So this is the kind of South Korea's initiative in response to this changing environment, as well as the even the post-Cold War era developments. But now, the key theme here today is the how this alliance has evolved. To discuss our future collaboration, we should understand how this alliance has evolved over the last 7 decades. Last year, we talked a lot about this issue. I think relating to this theme is that for some 10 years since the latter part of the President Lee Myung-bak era, our alliance has shifted our focus from this Korean Peninsula small scope to much broader scope, to regional and global agenda. So we adopted during the President Lee's and President Park's administration. We agreed on more than a dozen of the very important regional and global agendas. Now, General Harris, Ambassador Harris mentioned about Washington Declaration and the Camp David document. In that Washington Declaration, we agreed on more than 24, around almost 36 items, bilateral, regional, and global. To that extent, the scope of relations has changed a lot. So now Korea is no longer tied up with the North Korean issue. So that means how can you implement and operationalize that agreement and the vision? This is a big dilemma for the Korean government. But among these items, I think there are two historic milestones we achieved last year. One is the, as General Harris mentioned, the Washington Declaration that created the NCG, Nuclear Consultative Group, in addition to EDSCG, which I created in my when I was minister. And then secondly, this trilateral coordination mechanism among Korea, US, and Japan through 3 Camp David documents. This is a long story, but if we look at this, the last document titled The Commitment to Consult, this is a kind of Magna Carta in the history of our trilateral security cooperation, because there are a lot of implications in policy terms. One good example is that 3 countries are now have to consult expeditiously to 3 things. 1, challenges. 2, threats. 3, provocations in the Indo-Pacific region. If we look at the NATO's new concept, if we look at the so many, a dozen national security strategy reports, you cannot see threats and provocations, only challenges. But in this document, you can see 3 things. Whoever they are, any revisionist state, any status broker, any rule breakers, you can deal with all these issues together through that commitment to consult. This is a big change, big milestone, right? Globally, climate change on every other things. So I think this is relating to our second point. This is exactly in sync with the alliance objective. Last year, President Yoon and President Biden agreed on new addition to the existing comprehensive strategic alliance that is global. So now we are called GCS Alliance, Global Comprehensive and Strategic Alliance. It contains everything in terms of scope, in terms of domain, in terms of areas. So this is why many other potential rule breakers are very much sensitive to this trilateral cooperation mechanism. Recently, we further agreed on the trilateral cooperation secretariat. So this will enhance our collaboration in more detail, and nuts and bolts issues will be discussed. So already we have many built-in mechanisms. I think even in the Trump 2.1 administration, I hope and believe that this kind of built-in mechanism should continue, including NCG and this trilateral cooperation mechanism among Korea, Japan, and the United States, together with the AUKUS and the Quad, because it is to the interest of both United States and all these countries. And then I think even in the Trump 2.1 administration, we need to add some more new additional mechanism that benefits both of us. I think we can make that in a very creative and innovative way on not only just bilateral things, on regional and global things. I know a shrinking tendency on the part of the new administration may not be very much interested in this regional or global things because they are not in favor of the multilateralism. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, if there is a vacuum left by the Trump administration 2.0, what happened? Reasonably, I guess, that vacuum is very much likely to be filled by China or other major advanced middle powers. Already China has adding its own like-minded group through BRICS plus Alpha. Already there are 11 members. More than a dozen countries are now waiting in line to join that group, big countries. So, as the William Burns said in January at the Foreign Affairs magazine, the era for uncontested primacy of the United States is over now. They have to rely on the cooperation of the allies and partners and even the global South. We should not let China seize the opportunity to fill this vacuum, even though we are very close with China as well. So this is the reason why I agree with the General Sharp that on SMA, yes, money is important, but security or the global peace and security is not a matter of penny and cents. Sometimes penny wise result in pound foolish. You should not make that kind of mistake. So this is a very important message for the next administration. Instead of that, we should build up trust, build up new mechanisms. We should expand on the scope of this, the mutually beneficial items. So one very good idea was suggested by Mr. Trump during the conversation last week, that is shipbuilding, MRO. I think this is a very good idea. So I think this is what Korea can do more than anybody else in the world. So I think this is one important point, especially that will enhance our business people to pay more attention to more investment, more ensuring, and more import from the United States, I think. So that should be the winning game. Not my way, not your way. It should be our way, like the slogan of the Combined Forces Command. We go together. So very natural this flows into the final category. Then how we should deal with these many risks discussed by the international community. But there is a real concern on the part of the Korean people in the business, in the academia, in the opinion makers. But the government of Korea is very cool-minded, cool-hearted. Just 2 weeks ago, my colleague, Foreign Minister Cho, made it clear that South Korean government is very confident that even under the Trump 2.0 administration, our alliance will continue to thrive and prosper because here Republicans and Democrats are in agreement about the importance of the alliance. 70-year-old alliance. No single-term presidency, no double-term presidency was able to abandon this alliance or destroy this alliance. We overcome President Carter's decision to withdraw ground troops in 1976. The end result was that his agreement to create Combined Forces Command. During the President Bush Jr.'s time, we agreed on the dispatch of the Korean troops to Iraq. We agreed on the FTA. During Trump 1, we agreed on the FTA, revised FTA. So they are always to create very innovative ideas and agreements, despite all the challenges in the region and in the world. So this is exactly what we wish to see in the Yoon and Trump administration. Personally, I believe that the President Yoon will have a very good rapport or chemistry with President Trump because of their style and their nature, and especially in terms of their strategy. Our GPS strategy and Indo-Pacific strategy is exactly in line with President Trump's previous Indo-Pacific strategy, and his request to the allies and partners to share more burden. Yes, Korea is ready and willing to shoulder more burden. So we can discuss. If we want transactional diplomacy, yes, Korea, we can do the same transactional diplomacy. But as General Sharp said, much bigger plate, not on this single item, small plate on about penny and cents. Of course, it's not penny and cents, but nevertheless, we used to see the bigger picture. What we are called by Professor Cho and I, we are a community of faith. We are bound by the same interest due to North Korea's threat. That could reach, the ICBMs could reach now here, Washington D.C., could hit London, Berlin, not to mention South Korean capital Seoul. So we are a community of faith. So I think new administration in 2 months' time, I hope, could talk about all these three dimensions: bilateral alliance, regional things, global things. So there's a very good saying that if it ain't broke, don't break it. This is my hope. And then I do not have any problem with the MAGA, M-A-G-A. But if there is my own, it's only my way. I like Frank Sinatra, but if there is only my way, I wish to suggest to my colleagues in the next administration, it should be our way, like a CFC. We go together. So my suggestion, my conclusion is that, how about to add one more A to MAGA, M-A-A-G-A, make America an alliance great again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister Yoon, for that terrific overview. We have a lot to get to here, and I said, if anyone wants to make a short comment, I'd welcome it, or we can wait. I'm going to make just a slight comment. I'm very glad that you reminded us that there has been continuity and stability, notwithstanding ups and downs in the relationship over the years. And both you and I think the first transition I saw was from Carter to Reagan, and you could go through. But it's certainly a reality of our political system, as I think it is in Korea, that a new administration, even if it's the same party, but especially if it's the other party, wants to say we're doing something different. But I don't think we should underestimate, though, that I think we're at a rather exceptional time right now. And why it's so important to talk about these is how do we frame this in a way that makes it, that brings in the resilience and the breadth of the relationship and makes it, if you like, maybe a new flavor, but with some of the same, key ingredients. That may be not quite the way to put it. I'm just saying, for example, over the last 4 years, and I supported the Biden administration, the refrain has been the foreign policy of allies and partners, allies and partners. And those are words that ring well to us, in diplomacy and in our security services. They're not so much, in favor, I think, in the sort of rhetoric of the past couple of years. Allies have been seen as freeloaders. U.S. burden has been seen to be too high. So I'm saying I don't think we should underestimate the challenges we face, but rather identify them. In that respect, I'm glad that you did make mention of something that Ambassador Cho briefly mentioned, and that is, of course, as our relationship has broadened so much, it includes this incredible Korean investment in the United States, and the IRA, which again Ambassador mentioned, but also now this question of tariffs. And if a pillar of our relationship has been the U.S. Free Trade Agreement, how we talk about and handle trade is also going to be important. But I'm sorry, I'm abusing my position here, but I appreciated your comments. And Katrin, I don't know Victor, if you wanted to make any comments at this point, or we can.
I think some of the things I wanted to say also
fit into this
commentary on what former minister said. Yeah.
Okay, well, Victor, why don't we turn to you then? And as I said, I asked you to focus, you can talk about whatever you want, obviously, okay, but to focus a bit maybe on North Korea policy, following up on the discussion in the earlier panel.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ambassador Stevens, and pleasure to be here with such a great group. I want to congratulate the Korea Society on this Van Fleet Signature Conference, Jonathan and Chelsea and your team for putting this together here in D.C. I'm going to start by talking first about the significance of this DPRK-Russia relationship. and then move from there to the alliance, and then what I think are, panel was partly to look forward, so what I think are some of the difficult questions coming down the road. First, in terms of the DPRK-Russia relationship, you've all been reading about it in the newspapers. When I talked to my Russian friends, experts about this, they were generally of the view that this was largely a transactional relationship, fuel for ammunition, and that basically once the war ended, that this would kind of not matter anymore. And I think that's fundamentally wrong. I think that this is a very serious and dangerous relationship that has massive implications for the alliance and for security on the Korean Peninsula. We have to remember that the story, I think, of this relationship actually goes back to February of 2019, when Kim Jong-un's summit with Donald Trump failed spectacularly in Hanoi. This was the single biggest diplomatic gambit in the history of North Korea, right? To meet face-to-face with the U.S. president, mano a mano, right, face-to-face, to try to make a deal through, summit meetings, that failed. I mean, not only did it fail, Donald Trump walked out of the meeting, and Kim Jong-un had to take the long, long train ride home. This was, if part of Kim's leadership is the myth-making that goes along with that leadership, it could not have been more embarrassing. It could not have been more devastating. And he took the long train ride home, and then what happened? Then they went into COVID, right? 3.5 years, longer than anybody else. 3.5-year COVID lockdown, completely shut down the border with China. No food, no medicine, nothing for 3.5 years. So coming out of that, Kim Jong-un was, I would argue, in very bad shape. I mean, he had been embarrassed on the world stage. Domestically, he's in dire straits. And then the war in Ukraine happens. And at least in retrospect, it's pretty clear that North Korea saw an opportunity in that. They were one of the first countries to come out and immediately recognize Russian gains, territorial gains, at the beginning of the war. They were one of a handful of countries that opposed UN General Assembly resolutions condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And as soon as it became clear that this would be a protracted conflict and Russia would need millions of rounds of ammunition, there's only one country in the world that was willing to do that, right? And that was North Korea. It started with, a transaction with the Wagner Group, but then it became very fully and openly a munitions supply relationship. I think the number now is up to 9 million rounds of ammunition and probably more on the way. I mean, this was hugely beneficial, not just to Russia, because Putin could stave off doing a second mobilization, which is very unpopular at home, but it was very important for North Korea. The press, and I think even the U.S. and by the way, these are my views. They're nobody else's views. I just want to say, the press and even the U.S. government said, oh, well, these are munitions from the Korean War. Some of them don't even work and everything. And that may be true, but North Korea is not giving 9 million rounds of ammunition and if you think they're not replenishing their stocks, then I don't think you really understand North Korea. They are replenishing those stocks, and they're probably getting Russian help in terms of updating and making their munition supply much better than it was when they started giving ammunition to Russia. The two summits and then the security treaty between the two sides, the explicit security guarantee, the renewal of the Cold War security guarantee that we saw was the sort of commitment that Kim Jong-un could never get from China, from Xi Jinping. Right? And I think the provision of troops is in part a down payment on that security relationship. It's a mutual security relationship, and Kim Jong-un is putting a down payment on that by saying, I'm going to provide you with 11,000, 12,000, whatever the number is, troops, and reportedly some of their best troops for the purpose of saying that, I got you and you owe me if I ever need you, right? So that is a security relationship that North Korea now has in addition to their burgeoning weapons programs. And that puts pressure on China, right? when we were in government and we were doing negotiations and we would talk to the Chinese about putting pressure on North Korea, they would always say, we have much less pressure than you Americans think we do. Having said that, the Chinese guard whatever little pressure they have with a great deal of jealousy. And so the DPRK-Russia relationship is going to cause China to be more solicitous of North Korea, right? To lean forward more than they have in the past, and certainly to lean forward more than they have since the failure of the Trump-Kim summits. So again, some of you may remember before Donald Trump said he would meet with Kim Jong-un, Xi Jinping did not meet with Kim Jong-un once, would not do one summit meeting with him, didn't really like him, and tried to kept him at arm's distance. Once Trump announced he was going to meet with Kim Jong-un, and in those 2 years, 2018 to 2019, Xi Jinping met with Kim Jong-un 5 times. Right? Since the failure of Hanoi, he stopped meeting with Kim Jong-un. Right? So to me, this is a shoe that's eventually going to drop. Right? There's already been some high-level officials going between the two sides. And the point of all this is to say that the Ukraine war is about the best gift that Kim Jong-un could have hoped for, given where he was coming out of the pandemic. And I think both of them value this relationship for immediate needs, but also the pressure it puts on the United States in the sense that there's a North Korean threat that now resides outside of the peninsula, and in this case in the middle of Europe. And as well as putting pressure on China. For North Korea, this is a great way to put pressure on China. So I think this is a long-term relationship. I don't think it's going away. And of course, one of the concerns is how do you try to break up this relationship? So that was my first point. The second is on the alliance. And I really do agree with everything that's been said about the alliance, the accomplishments that have been made. I really do agree with that. Broader, deeper, stronger. MAAGA? I like that. I agree with that. But I think we really have to listen to what Donald Trump has said, right? And my concern is that I think we are in for a major transformation of the alliance that I'm quite worried about, right? And this is across the gamut. This with regard to trade, and we saw tariffs against U.S. allies in the first Trump administration. I think we should see the same, especially with those allies that have huge trade surpluses with the United States, like Korea, $51 billion trade surplus. So I think that's going to be different. The whole question of troops, I think, is something that we have to think is possible. Again, some of you have heard me say we've collected data at CSIS that documents all of Trump's statements on troop withdrawals going back to 1990. His first statement on U.S. troop withdrawals from Korea and Germany were in an interview in Playboy magazine when he was a businessman. So this is deeply, deeply rooted in his mindset, like deeply, deeply rooted in his mindset. And then, of course, his relationship with Kim and North Korea. I think, Trump always says he wants to end all wars, right? And I don't think he's only talking about Ukraine. I think he's talking about all wars, including ones that are, in a permanent state, a semi-permanent state of armistice. And so I worry, or I'm concerned about some sort of deal with North Korea that doesn't address all the concerns, of course, but that addresses his concerns with regard to this particular issue. I think this could come in a very concentrated period of time. He has basically 2 years, right, until the midterms. Right now, his administration has complete control of all the chambers. And so I think we could see a very concentrated period of time in which we may see sort of major transformational initiatives. And I use the word transformational in a dispassionate way. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it certainly is disruptive, transformational and disruptive. So what does that mean? I think it means some very difficult questions as we think about going forward. One of them that has already been raised has been the question of, in the earlier panel, the question of sort of nuclear weapons, right, in South Korea. I think Mike Macetic asked the question, you cited a poll of 66% of Koreans are in favor of nuclear weapons. We did another report, which I'll give you, in which we looked at strategic elites in Korea, and the strategic elite number was much lower. It was like 30-something%. However, we did ask strategic elites the question, if there were U.S. decoupling taking place, would your opinion change on nuclear weapons? And over 50% said that it would change. So this is a hard question, right? It's a hard question to ask, but what does it mean if Trump thinks about pulling troops or reducing the number of troops on the Korean Peninsula? What does that mean in terms of this national discussion on nuclear weapons? Second, I think, very difficult question is if Trump seeks a peace deal with North Korea that deals largely with no more ICBM testing and no more nuclear testing, but nothing else, right? How is South Korea going to deal with something like that? Would it be seen as U.S. decoupling? Is there something that could be salvaged from a peace deal for South Korea and South Korean security if Trump goes ahead with this? Third question, I think this came up in the earlier panel, is how should South Korea think about the alliance in a regional context, right? The strongest argument for a longer-term U.S. presence on Korea is certainly about North Korea, but it's also about the larger region, i.e. China, right? Very difficult questions for South Korea, I understand. But it's a very relevant question, right? As we all know, the force deployments on the Korean Peninsula are particularly geared towards one contingency, right? And that is a North Korean contingency, and not necessarily geared to a larger regional war. Maybe components of it are, but that is not the purpose of the presence on the peninsula. And is this something that should be thought about? And then the third, I've lost count, but the fourth thing I wanted to mention is the 11,000, 12,000 troops that are now in Kursk fighting. I think we look at this largely in terms of this is a transaction, right? There's money involved, there's fuel involved, who knows what else, maybe there's technology involved, we don't know. But the other way to look at it is that it's also telling us that it's telling us that the notion that somehow we could think of a non-denuclearized North Korea that would sort of sit where it is today and be successfully deterred from coercing, making any mischief, any of those sorts of things, if we just arm up around it, right? What North Koreans are doing in Russia does not prove that hypothesis, right? The fact that they are willing to go in the middle of Europe and start killing Europeans, right, for no reason, if anything, in the West, Europe has been the honest broker for North Korea. Their relations with European EU countries has been much better than that with the United States or Japan, and yet, right, they're willing to send troops in the middle of Europe to kill Europeans, right? This really disproves the notion that somehow North Korea, a non-denuclearized North Korea, can be sort of safely deterred, and it'll just kind of sit there and not bother anybody if we can ensure that they see danger in sort of taking any action on the peninsula or out of theater, because that's exactly what they're doing today. So, of course, I don't have the answer to any of these questions. I'm going to leave it to all of you to answer those questions, but these are things that sort of concern me today. Thanks.
Thank you, Victor. Yeah, these are the big, difficult questions, and I think we should return to them in our discussion period. And of course, I do want to hear from Foreign Minister Yoon on them as well as Katrin, but I'm going to turn to her now because I think she has the other kind of, if I can, difficult question, if you like, but also something that strikes me. You know, we were talking in the earlier panel about the SCM, the statements out of that. I mean, and that was only 3 weeks ago. That was the end of October. We had the signing of the new burden sharing agreement the day before the election, and then just exactly 1 week ago, I'm going to say, on November 15th, we had the 3 leaders of the U.S., South Korea, and Japan meeting in Peru and issuing a long statement, really long statement, that talked about all the things that have been accomplished in this trilateral relationship and all the things we hope to accomplish. And I think it's a difficult question in a way of how you go forward on that. So I hope I've teed this up all right for you, Katrin, but I will do that, and then I want to return to all of these themes that have been raised.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here. I also want to thank the Korea Society, honored to be here on this wonderful panel, and also to be with all of you. I mean, at these times of big change in the world, in changeover in administrations, domestic changes within the trilateral, we have Japan and the U.S. It's personally comforting to me to see so many familiar faces of experts and those who I would love to hear what you all are thinking right now in this time of flux. So that's another wonderful thing about these events, and just want to credit the Korea Society for bringing us all together today. Yes, as Ambassador Stevens very nicely teed up for me, I'll be speaking about the trilateral. I think the first panel did an excellent job of covering the security aspects, many of the security aspects for the trilateral. I'll be focused on the diplomatic aspects in my kind of thoughts and recommendations. But first, I'll just bridge the prior conversation to what I'm talking about now with a couple of thoughts, both that from Foreign Minister Yoon and Dr. Cha in what they were talking about, and then just weave it into the trilat. So Foreign Minister Yoon made a compelling case for all the reasons why South Korea is and will remain globally engaged, and this is something very much to look forward to continuing. I would note that we are presently in the United States at a point where there's a somewhat abstract debate with very concrete implications about whether regions can be linked, the security of regions can be linked or delinked from each other, right? So should the U.S. be focused primarily on Indo-Pacific, and can we delink our security from Europe? Or is that a fundamental misreading of the international system, and is that just out of the cards, and would that be ineffective? That's a very oversimplified version of a debate going on in the United States. And South Korea potentially could get caught up in the crosshairs, in continuing to remain globally engaged, particularly if the U.S. draws down and NATO has some kind of a conflict, disruption in relations with NATO, and South Korea is continuing to engage with NATO. I would posit that for South Korea, this is not an abstract debate. It is very clear that these regions are entwined, and that is because of the relationship that Dr. Cha so nicely fleshed out, recent developments in between North Korea and Russia. These issues have become very real on the peninsula. What's happening in Europe directly impacts South Korea. So my hope is that for the United States, under the new administration, would look at that as a very understandable response, for South Korea to remain engaged across these regions in terms of taking care of its own security and stepping up and doing things to increase its burden sharing, right? So a good thing for the alliance, even if, I don't know where that debate is going to end up in terms of advisors and approaches in this administration. That's one of these uncertainties. But that's just kind of my thoughts from these last two great sets of remarks. Okay, so shifting to the other very important topic of the trilateral. I'll just touch on 3 things. One, how important is the trilateral? Will it last at this moment? Can we project that? And what can we do about it? Okay, so my view, and I've said this many times before, it's hard to overstate the importance of the trilateral, particularly in the current threat environment. I think many in this room know how much work and how many stars needed to align to get this trilateral together. And we also know from the three very compelling Camp David statements, as well as many lengthy statements that have come, how many areas it's broadening and deepening cooperation across the three allies. So I think probably many of us in this room are pretty well convinced of the importance of the trilateral. But we're also in a moment of alliance skepticism in the United States. And I think it comes from, I guess, some kind of understandable views if you're kind of an American hearing that these alliances are expensive and we have things going on at home that we need to take care of. You know, why should we care about the trilateral? And so I think it's helpful to touch on kind of concrete examples of kind of before and after moments of what the trilateral, you know, what happened before these mechanisms were in place and what things look like now, in order to kind of demonstrate, not just say it's important, but demonstrate, like, here's scenario A and here's scenario B. And then leave it to the people of the United States to decide which is best in our interests, which scenario best serves our interests in the current threat environment. So the one time that has stuck out to me, among others, prior to this trilateral coming together, specifically in summer of 2023, among others, was in July in 2019, when Russia and China had a joint long-range patrol exercise over the EC, or Sea of Japan. Careful about what we call it. And Japanese and South Korean fighter jets scrambled. And at that time, South Korea, I don't know, many of you probably remember this, this moment. At that time, South Korean warning shots were fired. So a pretty tense moment, right? This sort of thing doesn't happen, as the military folks in the room know well, and many of you, this sort of thing doesn't happen a lot. But what was perhaps, more upsetting in a way in terms of the alliance was that Japan protested both Russia and South Korea in response to that incident. And so here you have this moment where the evolving global threats are becoming more clear, and we have a lack of coordination between, well, they're not allies themselves, between our shared allies in the United States, right? The kind of so-called quasi-alliance, but complaining about each other while we have these kind of looming more global threats evolving. And then fast forward to now, where we have joint military exercises going on. And we have, as Ambassador Stevens noted, lengthy joint statements happening. As Foreign Minister, you noted a commitment to consult. So that every time something like this happens, we might not be able to stop it. Russian and Chinese exercises are ongoing. But there's a coordinated response. And so I just kind of think about this like a metaphor. General Sharp had talked about we're alliances versus alliances now, and it's very similar. I think like this is a team sport now. Not to make light of it, but if there's a team building up on one side and they're showing and flexing their muscle, and they're flying over, and they're intentionally provoking, and their coordination and their information gathering is increasing as a result, should we really be weakening our side vis-a-vis that? Those are those are the stakes, and this is kind of a choice, because there's a lot of agency in this moment to either strengthen or weaken this trilateral. So that's, I think that it is kind of upon all of us to communicate, I guess, to broader audiences in this way, whether or not they care to hear my long blatherings, I don't know, but it might make it a little bit more concrete, what the stakes are here. It's not just, it's like the polling issue that was talked about before. It's like, do you like the alliances? They're expensive. Well, no. Well, what do you think about the lack of alliance in this? Well, there might be a different kind of, response there. And I do think a kind of public dialogue within the United States is imperative at this time. So that's the importance of the trilateral through, as I see it, and maybe a little bit about how we might be able to convey that. The second is, what are the prospects? Will it last? And we have a secretariat. We have a lot of steps to institutionalize the trilateral. Wonderful. Will those last in this era of alliance skepticism? And it's hard to say. I think it really depends on the Trump administration's relative prioritization of two aims that it has set out for itself in its very clear campaign statements. And I put those into two buckets. One is kind of more related to domestic, even though it's foreign policy related, but to domestic aims in terms of America First approach, versus more international aims. And to clarify, the campaign statements around the first bucket, the America First aims focus on getting better deals in areas of security, like burden sharing and trade, reducing deficits. Key statements and pledges in the campaign, I think you're all probably familiar with many of them. One interview, President-elect Trump had noted that he promised to levy tariffs on all imports in a bid to boost American manufacturing. To me, he noted the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariffs. On the topic of alliances and burden sharing, he noted our allies have taken advantage of us more so than our enemies, and also said South Korea's a money machine, and that if the negotiations for burden sharing happened today, he would get a much better deal. Okay. I think that he means what he says here. There's a lot of echoes from the first Trump administration. We are in an area of unpredictability, but this kind of steps, I think, are pretty predictable. Maybe that's a bit of a good thing, and that at least the allies know what's coming. But that's one bucket of aims that Trump himself has set out. But there's also this new category, which was not present in the first Trump administration. And that has to do with preventing World War III. I mean, it would have sounded a little bit hyperbolic in 2016 to say, I'm going to prevent World War III. And it doesn't now, as as we're all painfully aware. Just to cite a couple of campaign statements, he noted, I think it was a different interview, but sometime before the election, fairly recently, President-elect Trump noted, I will prevent World War III. Nobody else is going to say that. We are closer today to World War III than we've been since the Second World War. We will restore peace through strength, and that's what we had, basically, before. He also compared himself to Hillary Clinton, who said Trump is going to start wars, and he said, my attitude is I'm going to keep you out of war. We had no new wars other than I defeated ISIS, but that was a war that was already started. I think he also very much means this. And by the way, I am all for cheering for him in this front, and I think we all would be on the same page. But the problem is those two can be in direct conflict with each other. The question is whether the first bucket of aims is going to weaken the strategic aims. And so I think that there will be an attempt to approach both simultaneously. The key question is it possible to do both at once? Will there be an ability to compartmentalize these two spaces? Ultimately, I think it might come down to U.S. process. Will the first bucket of aims, is it possible to do it somewhat surgically? Or will there be a wrecking ball approach and the whole alliance will be shattered along the way? I can't answer those questions. But I think that's how I'm kind of framing the current moment and why it's hard to predict, because these two aims are in conflict with each other. So lastly, to wrap up, what should we do about it? So in my view, it would be how to get us more focused on the strategic initiatives. And, I think it's important for Trump, now that he's stated and stuck his neck out and saying, I'm going to make progress in this other space, we're going to go through that. But what should we do about this situation? There's no magic wand. I think it's, as others have said, it's going to be a very bumpy road. But just a few ideas. Again, these are more on the diplomatic side of things, so relationships, communications, and those sorts of things. In communications, I think to echo a lot that was said on the first panel, there's a lot to be said for pointing out continuity from Trump 1 to Biden to Trump 2, the free and open Indo-Pacific strategy, the Quad, and things that we can credit Trump for. And also noted in the first panel, good ideas tend to cross over administrations, so we can point out that not all of this is new and someone else's. It's yours. Okay, so I think that's a good way to kind of frame things in communications internally within conversations among the allies. The second, it's integral to keep the Korea-Japan ties strong. That's a huge asset right now that we have. But try to avoid a kind of ganging up dynamic where Trump perceives that, well, you both are on the same page now, and now you have similar interests in the spaces of tariffs and burden sharing. And that, I think, could be maybe a detrimental dynamic in the current moment. But the idea that Foreign Minister Yoon said that this is, a focus on our interests, using that kind of terminology. I mean, this is the magic of diplomacy in words. I think framing it in those ways is very important. And then finding something new, finding something, and something that's like a big splash that Trump can own in the trilateral space. I don't have the imagination to know what it is right now. Sometimes those things are driven by external events in order to be real, and I hope it's not a huge crisis that would drive that kind of thing, but something along the lines of a Washington Declaration, a Camp David Accord, to bring the trilateral to the next step, I think is important to get for President Trump to feel ownership over the trilateral. And then lastly, as you all probably heard about the kind of attempts to make close personal ties to President Trump. I believe that's really important. I do hope that President Yoon has a kind of a easy time forging a connection. I hope that Prime Minister Ishiba does as well, so that it's not a kind of competitive dynamic, but everyone together becoming friends, becoming close. And looking back on analyses of how Prime Minister Abe did that, and the very real impacts that had for Japan at that time, that it worked. It just shows that, yes, this is a person, this is a leader who can be quite transactional, but also who can be, in some way influenced by real bonds of friendship. And that it's not that the policy will shift, dramatically, but that it can be a different outcome because of those relationships. So it sounds a little bit strange to try to become friends for these. Hopefully there's real bonds there that they can make. But this isn't new either. I mean, there's always a search for chemistry between leaders, and it can be amazing how much chemistry between leaders can achieve. I think we've probably all witnessed it in government. And I, maybe I'm being, too hopeful to pin it on this, but in the diplomacy space, I'm hoping that we can have some strong relationships formed. And that's all for now. Thanks.
Terrific. Katrin, Dr. Katz, thank you so much. And to all three of you, I think we have a lot on the table now, a lot of great ideas. We have about a little bit less than 10 minutes for discussion. I do want to give Minister Yoon a chance if he wants to respond to some of the things we've heard from both Dr. Cha and Dr. Katz. There's a lot about what's going on here. Maybe a couple comments about that, and then I do want to have some time to open up. That's all right.
Okay. Even though I didn't speak a lot about these specific topics, if you talk with Korean policy community people, including former policymakers and academics, there is a kind of growing consensus about some items possibly to be taken by the Trump administration. Actually, already that is implied in the latest Republican platform. We don't see any reference to North Korean denuclearization. You may remember in 2017, President Trump made a very moving speech before the Korea's National Assembly. He said, instead of CVID, he said CVTD, complete, verifiable, total dismantlement. But now, in Singapore, there was only just complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. Now, at the platform, no reference. So this is the one worry relating to this Biden's government and even to the next government administration. This kind of the weakening reference on the North Korea's denuclearization, even though we understand realistically there is very no or little prospect of North Korea giving up their nuclear weapons, but in terms of strategy, we should not give up our objective of either CVID or CVTD or complete denuclearization. once we stop that effort, that means de facto recognition on the part of the U.S. and others for this North Korea's possession of nuclear weapons. So this is not a very good precedent for NPT and for our efforts for the last 25 years. And then secondly, yes, I think in Hanoi, no deal was a good result. For us, for me especially, no deal is better than bad deal. No deal is better than ugly deal. I hear a lot about some arms control exports here in the United States. You know, once you are into that game, you are supposed to be dragged into never-ending negotiation. This is very typical North Korean tactic and strategy. That happened during the Geneva negotiation. That happened during the six-party talks negotiations. And then that happened in 2009, 2009 very short negotiations. And then in 2018, we know that the Singapore joint statement was rushed to be finalized. So we do not very much appreciate the contents of this statement. Tae Yong-ho, North Korean de facto turned parliament at the time, called it, this looks like a North Korean foreign ministry draft. So now we are very careful to we have to be very careful to ensure that there should be no ugly deal or no bad deal. In that case, if that happens, then perhaps this is what Victor said. These real supporters for the independent nuclear forces in Korea, or reasonably minded these professionals who are still very much cautious about having independent nuclear capability, they will coalesce into one group for supporting these independent nuclear forces. But ironically, these groups are the strongest supporters for the alliance for the last 17 years. This is an irony. So you love your dictators and then bless their nuclear weapons de facto. But South Korea cannot have nuclear weapons, even the potential nuclear capability. What happened to the U.S. supporters in South Korea? This is the frustration we may have at the end of the day. So you have to be very careful in the next administration, for the sake of the transaction, if there's any possibility of recognizing de facto nuclear weapon state given to North Korea, that could be regarded as a disaster for our alliance. So this is what we should avoid.
Thank you. I regret that we have a hard start for our keynote speaker at noon, so I'm going to have to defer on questions for now. I apologize to the panel and to all of you. I hope if you stick around for lunch after our keynote speaker and our speakers do, I hope we'll have a chance to continue this conversation. There's a lot on the table. Please join me in thanking our panelists today. Seat.
Yeah, we'll take just about a 3-minute break, and then we'll commence with the keynote address. So please stay tuned. Directly after the keynote address, we'll have your lunch served right here. So just about 3-minute break, and please, one last time, give a warm round of applause for our diplomacy panelists. All right, I will commence. Our keynote speaker is Jed Royal, the Principal Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs. Mr. Royal oversees an extensive portfolio spanning China, Taiwan, Mongolia, East Asia, South and Southeast Asia. Before joining Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, Mr. Royal served as Deputy Director of the Defense Security Cooperation Agency and as the Director of Defense Policy and Plans at the U.S. mission to NATO. Mr. Royal started his career in the U.S. Senate as a legislative assistant for Near East and South Asia policy at the Foreign Relations Committee. He holds a degree in MPhil from the University of New South Wales, where his research and writing focused on the economic security nexus, something that's very important today, in particular the consequences of economic volatility on security relationships, highly relevant for our discussion. He completed his undergraduate studies in international affairs at George Washington University, just down the street, and he has generously offered to have some Q&A time after his initial remarks. So please get your questions ready. We'll end at right around 12:25. So please help me to welcome Mr. Royal to the stage.
Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. What a pleasure to be here with all of you. It's an honor to be here today for the Korea Society's Van Fleet Signature Policy event. I'm grateful to the Korea Society for hosting us here in the spirit of General Van Fleet, who enhanced the cultural wealth of our two countries and strengthened the friendship forged on the battlefields of Korea. And I'm particularly glad to be here to celebrate the enduring bond of the U.S. Rok alliance and to acknowledge our important achievements over the past several years. As Jonathan mentioned, I've come with a little bit of experience around the department. I'm about 24 years now into public service here in Washington and overseas assignments. I'm in my 10th job since I joined OSD policy, and it's just an extraordinary privilege to be held responsible for making sure that this alliance continues to progress. But as you are all aware, the security environment in the Indo-Pacific is growing both more complex and more dangerous. No doubt you've heard about this already today in your deliberations. The regional security landscape is heavily impacted by China's rapid military modernization, increasing provocations abroad, and comprehensive repression at home. Meanwhile, the DPRK continues to expand its nuclear and missile capability to threaten deployed U.S. forces, the Rok, and others in the region. And last year, the Kim regime abandoned the long-standing policy goal of peaceful reunification on the Korean Peninsula and ratified this change to its constitution earlier this year. We're also seeing continued DPRK efforts to fortify its side of the military demarcation line and persist with provocations near the northern limit line. And of course, we are deeply troubled to see the DPRK now implementing a new comprehensive strategic partnership with Russia, and has sent arms, ammunition, and most recently soldiers to fight in Russia's illegal and unprovoked war against Ukraine, the consequences of which are reshaping security conditions in both the Euro-Atlantic and in the Indo-Pacific. These developments are introducing new levels of unpredictability, a word I heard in the last panel. And to withstand these pressures, our responsibility is to harden and strengthen mutual reliance and mutual trust, first in the U.S. Rok relationship and then beyond. In 2023, we commemorated the 70th anniversary of the U.S. Rok alliance and set the alliance on an improved path with a new defense vision for the alliance, rooted in three pillars: strengthening extended deterrence, modernizing alliance capabilities, and bolstering regional cooperation. And 2024 has been a year of delivering on those new commitments. And our work together has had a transformative effect on the alliance. Only a few weeks ago, we conducted the 56th Security Consultative Meeting and the Foreign and Defense Ministers Meeting, otherwise known as the 2+2. I'd like to take stock of some of the key accomplishments coming out of these two events. First, and perhaps most importantly, we have swiftly advanced our work on nuclear deterrence through the U.S. Rok Nuclear Consultative Group. And key elements include security protocols and expansion of information sharing, nuclear consultation processes in crises and contingencies, nuclear and strategic planning, Rok conventional support to U.S. nuclear operations and a contingency, strategic communications, exercises, simulations, training, and investment activities, and risk reduction practices. And we also completed the guidelines for nuclear deterrence and nuclear operations on the Korean Peninsula, which provide an even firmer foundation for enhancing U.S. Rok extended deterrence cooperation in an integrated manner. Now, that is a lot of wonky Washington, D.C. words and does not make for a very ear-catching lunch presentation. But I can assure you that all of those words and the concepts that they represent are deeply important, both to how we will operate together and how we will convince the adversary that they have a lot to lose if they decide to pick a fight. And we spend a tremendous amount of time in our bilateral discussions dissecting these words and pressure testing these concepts in order to maintain the advantage and therefore maintain deterrence. And I firmly believe we have made tremendous progress in this regard. And amidst this ongoing work, we continue to expand the scope and scale of exercises to maintain a strong combined defense posture through our most important exercises, Freedom Shield and Ulchi Freedom Shield. And this year's Ulchi Freedom Shield underscored our enduring military partnership and combined ability to adapt to evolving threats. It incorporated lessons from recent conflicts and will continue to evolve with more realistic multi-domain crisis and conflict scenarios on the peninsula. We've also made key upgrades to information sharing and missile defense capabilities that enhance our combined ability to detect and respond to DPRK missile threats, including new and advanced DPRK capabilities. We remain postured to deal with a broad range of security challenges together. Second, we're modernizing our capabilities by expanding science and technology cooperation. At the SCM, that's that senior consultative meeting, our defense leaders announced the establishment of the Defense Science and Technology Executive Committee. And this committee will advance innovation and transform our military force with cutting-edge technologies. We have a very ambitious agenda, including autonomy, artificial intelligence, and crewed-uncrewed teaming. These emerging technologies will be absolutely necessary. As we apply the lessons of Ukraine, it is clear that the combination of mass and precision will be essential in a future fight. The United States and the Republic of Korea have a great deal of combined expertise that can keep us steps ahead of the adversary. And across the board, we're bolstering our defense industrial cooperation to develop, acquire, and maintain capabilities at the speed of relevance. I was in Seoul last week and had the pleasure of thanking ROK leadership for their support of the newly launched Partnership for Indo-Pacific Industrial Resilience. PIPER, as it is called, is a multilateral forum comprised of the Indo-Pacific and Euro-Atlantic partners collaborating to strengthen defense industrial resilience in the Indo-Pacific region. Alongside Seoul and a dozen other capitals, we have created the first ever consortium to support defense armaments requirements across the globe, unlocking new sources of supply, capturing new production arrangements, and ensuring that we can increase the time on station of key assets and platforms with smarter logistics and forward repair and upgrade. I want to particularly applaud ROK for their key partnership in this area of aviation and ship maintenance. They've been improving the interoperability and the interchangeability of our defense industrial bases, and it's making a big difference. Hanwha Group's acquisition of the Philly shipyard in Philadelphia, it's actually called the Philly shipyard, is an example of South Korea's major investments in the U.S. shipbuilding industry, showcasing the opportunities for industrial base collaboration. We welcome the recent conclusion of consultations related to the 12th Special Measures Agreement and look forward to its ratification by the ROK National Assembly. And this will put us in a durable position with U.S. forces based in South Korea going forward. It is an important time to put some emphasis on how we share the burden and the responsibility for security in this critical part of the world. The next administration will undoubtedly look to understand these arrangements for themselves. And I would add that sharing responsibility is not just about defense spending or SMA contributions. The ROK's high-tech industrial base, for example, can provide a concrete and tangible contribution to sharing the burden of maintaining peace and stability. And ROK's support to others in the region is also part of working together for our mutual security benefit. More to say on that in a moment. We are also adapting to evolving threats in the region. At the 2+2, we announced that Article 3 of the Mutual Defense Treaty applies in the space and cyber domains under certain circumstances. We also affirmed the need to strengthen information sharing and joint response capabilities against increasing space and cyber threats. And finally, we've made historic strides in bolstering our multilateral cooperation, including through trilateral security cooperation with Japan. In the 15 months since President Biden, President Yoon, and Prime Minister Kishida met at Camp David in August of 23, our three countries have made rapid progress. Last December, we activated a mechanism that allows us to share early warning missile data in real time, and we use it on a regular basis. In fact, every time the DPRK fires off another missile. We also executed the first two iterations of the Freedom Edge exercise, which operates across multiple domains, such as air, sea, and cyber, and it is the first trilateral exercise to have its own name. Freedom Edge demonstrates the unbreakable will of our countries to safeguard freedom and ensure peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific, including on the peninsula. These achievements were underpinned by the close communication between our defense leaders, who met 3 times in 1 year. And this included the trilateral ministerial meeting in Tokyo, which marked the first time our defense leaders met in Japan, and they signed a trilateral security cooperation framework to institutionalize and deepen our cooperation. And next year, our defense leaders will make history again by holding a trilateral ministerial meeting in Rok for the very first time. The shared vision of the alliance extends beyond the peninsula. Both the United States and the Rok have a common view of an Indo-Pacific region that is free, open, prosperous, and secure. Recognizing these shared interests, we developed and endorsed a new framework to advance our respective security cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. This framework will allow us to deepen and expand our cooperation in Southeast Asia and with Pacific island countries. And yesterday was a great example. ROK Minister of National Defense Kim joined Secretary Austin and their counterparts in Japan, Australia, and the Philippines while they were in Laos together at the ADMM Plus meeting. And they got together and had a meeting focused on assisting the Philippines with its own defense requirements. This is precisely the kind of outreach and support that we will need to send the right signals and to cultivate the right relationships. As a former director for defense policy at the U.S. mission to NATO, I'm especially proud of the expansion of cooperation between the ROK and NATO after the upgrade of its relationship last year. Following the DPRK's deployment of forces to Russia, the ROK briefed the senior-most decision-making body at NATO, the North Atlantic Council. And I've heard from my former colleagues still there in Brussels that this is one of the most productive exchanges between NATO and the IP4 countries. I am convinced that NATO has a lot to gain from drawing closer to South Korea and to others in the region. The world is getting smaller, and we need to do everything we can to keep it stable. So that is a lot, and I apologize for the long list, but I wanted to convey just how hopeful I am about the work we have done and the work we have ahead of us. We've continued to deliver and build on unprecedented cooperation over the last 4 years. I'm confident that our bond, not only over the last 4 years, but over the past 71 years, is enduring and built to last. Our collective security efforts are decades in the making, and together we will continue to solve the world's most pressing problems. I'm very happy to take a few questions, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much for doing this. My name is Jooni, a reporter from Voice of America's Korean Service. I have 2 sets of questions on regarding DPRK and the Russia relationship. How significant is the relationship between these 2 countries? Do you see this as more of transactional relationship or a serious long-term relationship? And a second question is that now we know that there are about over 10,000 North Korean troops in Kursk Oblast, and some Republican members of Congress have called for direct military action against North Korean troops if North Korean troops were to invade Ukraine. What kind of response do you expect to see from the United States on this deployment of North Korean troops? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. 2 great questions. Your first question, is this a transactional relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow, or should we be taking it seriously? I don't think we need to distinguish between those 2. Even if it remains largely transactional, it can still be something that we need to take very seriously. And without a doubt, the Department of Defense is taking this very seriously. If the question is about where does this go from here, we're all watching and waiting and understanding the nature of this relationship. I think a lot about who is getting the most out of this relationship right now. I think there's a clear signal on the Russian side that they're feeling a little bit desperate, that they need something different. They're looking to others to help support them with their own defense industrial requirements, their wartime economy. They're struggling, and DPRK represents an outlet, a lifeline of some sorts to them. And so that's what they're getting out of this. But I do think that Pyongyang is getting quite a lot. They're getting Russian support on the international stage at the UN and through other venues. They're getting most likely technology and useful technology to support their own advancements in their military developments. I don't know that it yet represents anything along the lines of alliance. I wouldn't speculate that we're at that point at this juncture. But I do think that it is an alarming development, and one, again, that I think draws us closer to an understanding that the developments that occur in the European theater have an impact on outcomes and regional security considerations in the Indo-Pacific theater, and vice versa. So we're not yet, I wouldn't describe a single theater of operations, but I would say we are in a single theater of consequence. And we need to be able to make sure that we're translating the lessons and the understanding across both theaters. And this is why I was really wanting to point out the NATO relationship with the IP4 countries. I really think that there's quite a lot more there that we need to explore and understand how we can share information correctly, understand the different adversarial elements across both theaters, and coordinate policies in a way that allow us to present the united front wherever the rules-based international order is under threat. Your second question, I think, was about what will the U.S. do in the event of a certain amount of DPRK troops in Ukraine. I'm not going to jump into hypotheticals. You've heard that from people like me a lot. But what I will say is that this is an important development as it relates to Ukraine's future. We are taking it very seriously. We're spending a lot of time talking with other allies and partners about what it means. And on some level, we're also engaging directly with President Yoon and his team on what the South Koreans think about this development as well. I do think that there is opportunity for us to adjust the way that we're supporting Ukraine in the future, and we're looking at the full range of options on how to do that. Thank you. Certainly don't want to get between you and lunch here. It's starting to smell really good on this side of the room over here.
I feel kind of selfish, but I'll jump at the bit. So North Korea has all these ambitious goals for how they want to advance their nuclear and missile technology. Let's say that they're successful at a lot of these things. Miniaturization, tactical nuclear weapons, MIRVs, we can imagine them getting that sort of support for Russia, improving their targeting capability, satellite imagery. So if they're successful in pushing forward towards the development of those capabilities, how do we as an alliance need to adapt in order to maintain and then enhance deterrence?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think there's two elements to this. One is to maintain the foundation of the alliance, just do the fundamentals really, really well. So the exercises that I described here, the upgrades to understanding the nuclear deterrence relationship, really digging into the details of what those concepts mean, and bringing together operators on both sides through the Combined Forces Command and beyond to be sure they understand what their roles and responsibilities are. All of those pieces are sort of foundational for the alliance, and we can't take them for granted. It takes real effort to make sure that we are up to the task on those basic foundational levels. So I would say that's point one, and I'm really pleased that the amount of time we've spent in the bilateral relationship really caring for those fundamentals has paid off in a major way. And then secondly, I think that we need to find the technological advantage here. We need to maintain that edge that we already have. And there is careful investment with technology security cooperation activities. That's tech release certainly as well. That is co-production of new systems that are tailor-made for what our alliance requirements are, but also looking to see how others are going to be investing in this. And we've got just an incredible amount of research and development that's occurring right now. Certainly in the U.S. system, we've made generational investments in our RDT&EM budget. But we just need to make sure that we are aggregating all of those investments so that they yield specific platforms, specific weapon systems that can be scaled to present the right sort of deterrence message. And then, as necessary, obviously defend the sacred ground that we need to defend going forward here. Those things are happening. I will tell you, I think we're doing a little bit better on the foundational issues. We need to pick up our game a little bit on that RDT&E side there. And I think that there is another level or two we can find if we really commit ourselves to it in the coming years. Go. Sure, thanks.
Hi, I'm Marissa McPherson. I'm with the National Committee on North Korea. And it seems to me that as we're looking at multiple approaches, including national security, including engagement, it seems to me that while both goals are incredibly important, the advancement of one seems to cause the other to backpedal or weaken a bit. In your mind, is there a way for both of these goals to advance simultaneously? And if so, how do you see that happening?
Sorry, can you tell me the twin goals one more time that you're referring to?
Engagement, dialogue, track twos, scientific, cultural, or educational exchange, humanitarian involvement, and also defense and national security goals.
That's a great question. I will tell you, I am responsible for the second element of that, and that's really where 100% of my focus is going, is to make sure that we are building the right kind of defense architecture that's at the strategic level, political level, in terms of how we understand one another, all the way down through the operator level to the tactical level. So I'm spending a lot of my time there. I will leave it to others to really try to make sure that outreach opportunities are doing everything that we need to do on the diplomatic side. And I really think that if we do our job well on our side, we're giving opportunity on the diplomatic and other outreach side. To the extent that there is opportunity there, then I'm sure others will find it. But those won't really yield or bear fruit if we're not doing our job well on the defense and the alliance management side. So to me, that's really where I'm going to continue to stay focused. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for gathering. It really means a lot when folks get together and really dig into these ideas, pressure test these ideas. It's important for policymakers and policy advisors like me to draw out of these discussions everything that we can for the U.S. government work ahead of us. So thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. One last time for Mr. Jed Royal. Really wonderful job. And please help me to welcome our President, Tom Byrne, who's going to have the last word here. Tom.
Well, we heard a range of views this morning and on the state of the alliance in 2024. And listening to those views, my opinion is primarily informed by the many new ways in which the two countries are working together. At the policy level, such as the Washington Declaration, at the practical level, the MRO that improves the industrial base in the U.S. So my opinion is, putting on my analyst hat, is that I see the fundamentals strengthening. I would keep a positive outlook on the alliance's ability to be upgraded over time, and also to prove resilient to whatever economic or political challenges may pop up in the years ahead. So I look forward to seeing you all again, hopefully next year, when we take an assessment of the state of the alliance in 2025. So thank you for coming.